Understanding Dhamma giving. What if the generosity most Buddhists speak about is still only the outer shell of what the Buddha meant? In almost every Buddhist community, in almost every temple courtyard, in almost every family that keeps even a little faith, the word giving is already familiar. People grow up hearing it. They hear about offering food, supporting monks, helping the poor, making donations, sharing what one has so that blessings will come. It sounds warm, wholesome, safe, and complete. But if we slow down for just a moment and ask, what is giving really? Something unsettling begins to appear. Many of us have heard the word all our lives, yet have never truly entered its depth. If you find this useful, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment. This is not a criticism thrown at others from a distance. It is a quiet concern born from looking closely at the way ordinary devotion often works. So many sincere lay Buddhists believe that giving means this: I give now, and in a future life I will become wealthy. I offer, and later I will receive. I create merit, and merit will return to me as comfort, status, abundance, protection. And to be fair, that understanding is not entirely wrong. The teachings do speak of karmic fruit. Giving does support conditions for future well-being. Acts of generosity do matter. Merit is real. The fruit of wholesome action is real. But there is a painful smallness in stopping there. Because if giving is understood only as a spiritual investment, then even generosity can remain trapped inside craving. It may wear the face of kindness, but deep down it still circles around me. I give so that I may gain. I release so that I may receive. I help, but somewhere inside I am still bargaining with life. And when the heart approaches giving in that way alone, it may collect merit, but it has not yet touched freedom. It may create future comfort, but it has not yet understood the burning urgency of the Buddha's teaching. This is why many people can spend years doing good deeds and still remain far from the deeper spirit of Dharma. They are not evil. They are not insincere. In fact, many are deeply devout, deeply respectful, and full of reverence. They bring offerings carefully. They bow with emotion. They recite chants. They support temples and sangha. They do beautiful things. But often, behind all that goodness, one crucial question has never been faced with enough honesty. What exactly am I doing when I give, and why? If the answer is only, so I can have more later, then something essential is still missing. Think of the atmosphere many of us know so well. A household prepares offerings in the early morning. Rice is warm, fruit is arranged, incense is lit. Someone reminds the children to be respectful. Someone says, offer well and you will have blessings. Another says, give and next life you won't be poor. There is tenderness in this. There is sincerity in this. There is beauty in this. But hidden inside that simple scene is also the possibility of a very narrow understanding. A child may grow up thinking generosity is basically a sacred transaction. A little loss now, a bigger reward later, a transfer into a future account, a karmic savings plan. Again, that is not false, but it is painfully incomplete. Because when the Buddha speaks, he is never merely teaching us how to decorate samsara more comfortably. He is not simply teaching us how to be richer in the next round of birth and death. He is pointing toward wisdom. He is pointing toward seeing. He is pointing toward a radical shift in how we understand self, life, possession, impermanence, and loss. Without that vision, even a good act can remain shallow. Without that vision, giving may still be happening. But the one who gives has not yet awakened to why giving becomes natural, necessary, and obvious to a person who truly understands life. This is where the tension begins. Almost every Buddhist has heard the word giving, but very few have stopped long enough to ask what giving really is. At the most ordinary level, giving means to hand over what one has to someone who needs it. That is the surface meaning. That is the visible form. Food is shared. Money is offered, clothing is donated, medicine is provided, labor is opened, time is spent, comfort is extended. This outer level matters. It should not be dismissed. To relieve suffering in simple ways is already good. The world survives because someone still knows how to give in this basic sense. But the deeper question is not only what leaves the hand. The deeper question is what has awakened in the heart. There are people who give a lot and remain frightened. There are people who donate generously and still cling inwardly. There are people who make offerings often, but every act is measured, calculated, and secretly anxious. Will this bring blessings? Will this be enough? Will I gain something equal or greater? Will my family prosper because of this? This is still a mind negotiating with uncertainty. It is still a mind trying to secure itself in a world that cannot be secured. And that is the real issue. Many acts of merit are performed without truly seeing the nature of life, without seeing how fragile the body is, without seeing how unstable possessions are, without seeing how quickly relationships, roles, plans, and identities can change, without seeing that this whole human condition is passing, vulnerable, exposed. We live as though there is time to hold everything, as though ownership is stable, as though loss is a future event instead of a present truth. Then we make merit from inside that illusion, and we call that understanding. But understanding has barely begun. Imagine a person living in a house that has already caught fire. Not a fire that may come one day, but one that is already burning now, even if the flames have not yet reached every room. Smoke is in the walls. Heat is under the roof. Collapse is certain. Only the timing is unclear. In that house, what would intelligence look like? Would a wise person sit down and admire the furniture? Would they keep polishing what cannot be preserved? Would they cling to every object as if there were still endless time? Of course not. They would carry out what could still be carried. They would move quickly. They would know that delay is foolish. This image opens a door into the deeper meaning of giving. The body itself is like that burning house. This body of birth, aging, pain, and death is never secure. It can fail at any moment. Breath can stop unexpectedly. Strength can disappear. A diagnosis can arrive. An accident can happen. A life can turn in one afternoon. Yet most people live as if they are storing treasure inside a building that will never burn. They hold, collect, guard, worry, compete, and identify. Then when they give, they imagine they are doing something unusually noble, something extra, something optional, something spiritually impressive. But from the standpoint of wisdom, giving is not first about being impressive. It is about seeing clearly. A person who begins to understand Dhamma does not look at generosity merely as a religious technique for future prosperity. That person begins to feel something much more direct. If nothing here can truly be kept, then what am I clinging for? If this life is unstable, then why wait to let goodness flow? If what I call mine can leave me at any time, then why not use it now in a meaningful way? Why not turn what cannot be held forever into benefit while there is still time? Now the heart starts to shift. Giving becomes less like a strategy and more like sanity. Less like a special spiritual program and more like the natural behavior of someone who has finally noticed the truth. Because once you begin to see impermanence, possession becomes lighter. Once you begin to see vulnerability, compassion becomes more immediate. Once you begin to see that all beings are exposed to sickness, aging, separation, and death, generosity is no longer just charity. It becomes a response to reality. That is why reducing giving to "I give so I can be rich later" is such a poor reading of a rich teaching. Yes, future wealth may be one fruit, but if that is the only fruit we care about, then our understanding is still very worldly, still very small, still very hungry. We may be using religion to continue the same old dream. More security, more comfort, more possession, just pushed into another lifetime. The language sounds spiritual, but the heart is still asking for the same thing it has always asked for: more for me. And yet the Buddha's path gently, steadily, uncompromisingly asks us to look deeper than that. It asks, who is this me that keeps trying to secure itself? What exactly is being protected? What in this world can actually be held? What follows us? What does not? What kind of wealth survives the moment of death? What kind of giving transforms the giver? Not only the balance of future conditions. These are not abstract religious questions. They are intimate questions. They touch every meal, every purchase, every act of sharing, every moment of hesitation, every attachment we defend. They ask whether generosity is merely an activity we perform, or whether it is evidence that our way of seeing life has begun to mature. And maybe this is where many of us need to become more honest. It is easy to admire generosity from the outside. It is harder to inspect the motive. It is easy to say, I made merit. It is hard to ask, what was happening in my mind while I did it? Was there joy, fear, calculation, pride, social pressure, hope for praise, hope for reward, habit, love, clarity? Was there real awareness of impermanence? Was there any understanding of non-ownership? Was there any sense that this act was not a loss, but a release? Because in the deeper teaching, giving is not measured only by the object transferred. It is illuminated by the wisdom present or absent in the act. Two people may offer the same thing, but inwardly they inhabit completely different worlds. One gives with anxiety, one with gratitude. One gives to gain, one gives because clinging has become too painful. One gives as a transaction, one gives as understanding. Outwardly similar, inwardly far apart. So when we begin this exploration of Dhamma giving, we begin in the familiar world, the ordinary world, the devotional world most Buddhists already know. We begin among incense, offerings, temple visits, family teachings, and the sincere wish to gain merit. We do not mock that world. We honor its sincerity. We acknowledge its truth. But we also admit that it is only the doorway, not the whole house. Because there is a deeper, more unsettling truth waiting behind the familiar one. For one who understands life, giving is not a special practice reserved for holy moments. It is not an occasional badge of goodness. It is not only a means to future wealth. It is the natural response to impermanence. It is what happens when wisdom begins to loosen the fist of ownership. It is what happens when the heart finally sees that keeping everything is impossible, and using what we have for goodness is the only intelligent way to live. And once we acknowledge this shallow meaning, honestly, without denying it and without stopping inside it, we are ready to open the door to something deeper. What giving really means when it is illuminated by Dhamma. So let us begin with the meaning that most people already know. In its most ordinary sense, giving means exactly what it appears to mean. I have something, someone else needs it, and I choose to offer it. It may be food, money, medicine, clothing, shelter, time, labor, attention, or even a kind word. At that level, the meaning is simple. A hungry person is fed. A suffering person is relieved. A person in difficulty receives support. Nothing about this should be dismissed. This kind of generosity already softens the world. And yet, from the perspective of Dhamma, that is only the first layer. Because if giving is understood only as transferring possessions from one hand to another, then the heart may still remain trapped in a very small idea of itself. It may still secretly believe, this is mine, I am the owner, I am the giver, I am sacrificing something for the sake of a future return. In that mindset, even goodness can remain bound up with bargaining. I give now so that I may receive later. I lose a little in order to gain a lot. I part with something visible in the hope of securing something invisible. That is why many people can speak about generosity for years, understand it only on the surface. They know the language of merit, but not yet the freedom inside it. They know that giving may lead to blessings, prosperity, favorable rebirth, or good conditions in the future. And while that is not false, it is still narrow if that is all one sees, because then giving becomes almost like investment. It becomes spiritual commerce. It remains tied to the logic of possession, only now projected into another lifetime. The deeper teaching shifts the whole center of gravity. In a deeper sense, giving is not merely a good deed one performs from time to time. It is not a decorative virtue added on top of an otherwise self-centered life. It is not an elite practice reserved for saints, monastics, or rare heroic souls. It is the inevitable expression of right seeing. It is what naturally appears in a person who has begun to understand, even a little, what the self really is, what life really is, and what all conditioned things really are. When a person has not yet reflected deeply, they live as though ownership were solid. They feel my body, my wealth, my plans, my family, my status, my years, my future. Everything is wrapped in the language of mine, and from that assumption, withholding seems reasonable. Clinging seems natural. Protecting, accumulating, and measuring become the basic habits of the mind. But when wisdom begins to dawn, even slightly, that structure starts to tremble. What is this self that claims to own? What is this life that can be interrupted at any time? What are these things we call ours, if they arise due to causes, remain briefly, and then pass away beyond our control? The more one contemplates carefully, the harder it becomes to maintain the fantasy of permanent possession. We do not truly own the body because it changes without asking us. We do not own our breath because one missed breath can end everything. We do not own our loved ones because they too are travelers passing through conditions. We do not own wealth because it can disappear through illness, disaster, conflict, betrayal, inflation, time, or death. Even our thoughts do not fully obey us. So what then are we clutching with such tension? This is where giving becomes something much deeper than charity. It becomes realism. It becomes the sane response to impermanence. It becomes the conduct of someone who no longer wants to live intoxicated by the illusion of ownership. Such a person does not give merely because giving is praised. They give because not giving begins to feel irrational. They see that to cling to what cannot be kept is a form of confusion. They see that to use temporary conditions for goodness is wiser than trying to freeze them into private security. This is why, in the deeper Buddhist understanding, giving is almost unavoidable for one who sees clearly. Not unavoidable in the sense of social pressure, but unavoidable in the sense that wisdom naturally opens the hand. When the truth of instability is felt in the bones, generosity is no longer an artificial moral performance. It becomes as natural as exhaling. At that point, the inner sentence changes. It is no longer, I give so that one day I will become rich. It becomes, since nothing here can be kept, let it become useful while it passes through my hands. That is a completely different heart. One heart calculates, the other understands. One heart gives with fear of loss and hope of reward. The other gives from intimacy with impermanence. And there is great tenderness in this shift, because it does not make us cold toward the world. It does not say, nothing lasts, so nothing matters. It says almost the opposite. It says, because nothing lasts, how precious it is to use this fleeting life well. Because the body is fragile, let these hands serve. Because resources are uncertain, let them support what is wholesome now. Because relationships are brief, let love become action. Because this day will not return, let some goodness be done before night falls. From this perspective, giving is no longer only about the recipient. It is also about freeing the giver from delusion. It is a training in non-clinging, yes, but even more than training, it is evidence of understanding. A person may talk elegantly about impermanence, non-self, and the instability of worldly things, but if their life remains tightly closed, fearful, and grasping, then wisdom has not yet penetrated very far. When understanding deepens, conduct changes, the hand reveals the heart, and the way we release things says a great deal about what we truly believe. To understand giving in this way is also to understand that generosity is not a loss. Or rather, what is lost is exactly what should be lost. Some greed, some fear, some intoxication with possession, some blindness about what this life really is. The material object may leave our hand, but something heavier may leave the mind as well. And that second release is often the more important one. This is why the old saying carries so much truth. What I consume is gone with me, but what I let become nourishment for others continues. If I eat the food, it ends there. If I use the resource only for myself, its story is short. But when it becomes medicine, shelter, learning, relief, protection, support, or an offering connected to goodness, then its life extends beyond my own appetite. In that sense, giving rescues things from being wasted on mere consumption. It redeems fleeting wealth by letting it participate in something larger than private pleasure. And we should be honest here. The mind does not easily leap into this deeper vision. Most of us begin where nearly everyone begins. We start with mixed motives. We give and still want recognition. We give and still hope for blessings. We give and still feel the pinch of self-concern. This is normal. The path does not require us to pretend we are already free, but it does ask us to grow. It asks us not to remain forever in the kindergarten of merit-making. It asks us to let generosity mature from transaction into wisdom. That maturation is one of the most beautiful movements in spiritual life. At first, a person may think, I should give because it is good. Later they think, I should give because it brings merit. Deeper still they think, I should give because others truly need help. But eventually, if Dhamma penetrates the heart, another understanding emerges. I give because this whole field of life is unstable, and clinging to passing things is suffering. Since I cannot carry any of this with me, let what can be used for goodness be released now. That is no longer ordinary morality. That is insight becoming behavior. And once we begin to feel this, generosity stops being occasional. It becomes woven into how one sees food, money, property, knowledge, influence, time, energy, and even one's own capacities. Whatever appears in one's life is no longer viewed only as private entitlement. It becomes responsibility. It becomes opportunity. It becomes something passing through one's care for a brief moment, asking to be handled wisely before it disappears. This is why the deeper meaning of giving is not sentimental. It is urgent, sober, and awake. It is born from seeing that life does not wait. Death does not send an appointment in advance. Loss does not always negotiate. Change does not ask whether we feel ready. So the question is not whether what we call ours will one day be taken. The only real question is whether, before that day comes, we will have transformed any of it into goodness. And this is exactly why the Buddha's teaching on giving can feel so direct, even startling. It is not trying merely to make us nicer. It is trying to make us lucid. It is trying to wake us from the dream that says, there is still time. I can hold this a little longer, I will let go later. But later is a promise no one owns. Once this deeper meaning is understood, even partially, the emotional atmosphere changes. Giving is no longer framed by scarcity alone, and intelligence. We stop asking only, how much can I keep? We begin asking, what should be released while release is still possible? We stop thinking only in terms of generosity as donation. We begin seeing it as evacuation from illusion. And from here, the Buddha's image arises with tremendous force. This life, this body, this unstable world of borrowed conditions is like a house already on fire. In a burning house, no wise person sits polishing furniture and arguing about ownership. No one says, this chair is mine, that cloth is mine, this room defines me. In a burning house, the intelligent act is immediate. Whatever can be carried out, especially what is precious, usable, and worth saving, must be brought out at once before the flames take it. That image does not exaggerate our situation. It reveals it. Nothing about the metaphor is decorative. It is simply what is already true, described plainly, without the comforting distance we usually place between ourselves and the fact of our own impermanence. We live as though we have time stored away somewhere. We speak of next year, later on, someday when things settle down, someday when the children are older, someday when business is better, someday when the body is stronger, someday when the mind is calmer. But the Dhamma asks us to pause and look more honestly. What exactly is this someday resting on? This body is not a fortress. It is not a permanent address. It is a fragile arrangement of conditions, exposed every moment to change, decline, accident, illness, separation, and death. Birth has already begun its movement toward aging. Aging is already carrying us toward weakness. Weakness is already leaning toward collapse. The fire is not coming from outside one day in the future. In a very real sense, it is already here. This is why the image of the burning house is so powerful. A house in flames does not wait for our convenience. It does not ask whether we feel emotionally prepared. It does not stop burning because we are still attached to what is inside. If something truly matters, the moment to move it is now, while movement is still possible. If there is something worth saving, wisdom does not delay. Wisdom does not decorate the danger. Wisdom does not negotiate with impermanence. Wisdom responds, and the Buddha is pointing us toward a painful truth that most of us spend our lives avoiding. This body of birth, aging, pain, and death can stop functioning at any time. A breath can fail, a vessel can rupture, a cell can turn. A fall, a fever, a diagnosis, a single night, a single phone call, a single unnoticed moment, and everything changes. We know this intellectually, but we rarely let it enter the heart deeply enough to alter how we live. We hear that life is uncertain, yet we still behave as though certainty belongs to us. We continue building identities around possessions that cannot protect us, around status that cannot accompany us, around roles that can vanish in a single season. That is why one who truly studies the Dhamma cannot study it as a decoration for the mind. To learn the Dhamma is to learn how to see the fire clearly. To practice the Dhamma is to stop pretending that the house is stable. And to understand generosity in this light is to realize that giving is not merely a moral option for especially kind people. It is an intelligent response to the condition of existence itself. If the body is a burning house, then what does it mean to carry something out of it? It means learning, while breath still remains, how to transform what cannot be kept into what can still bear wholesome consequence. Wealth cannot be held forever. Property cannot be defended forever. Food, clothing, comfort, ornaments, titles, praise, influence. All of it remains inside the house if it is clung to only for self. And whatever remains in the burning house will burn with it. Not because generosity is a transaction, but because all conditioned things are unstable, and what is not used wisely is simply overtaken by loss. A person who understands this begins to look at life differently. They do not ask only, "What do I own?" they ask, "What in my life can still be turned into goodness before death closes the hand?" They begin to see that money sitting in a bank account may support a life for a while, but money turned into relief, protection, nourishment, education, medicine, shelter, or support for the Dharma has already begun to leave the burning house. It has already been moved into another kind of continuity. It has already been converted from temporary possession into karmic potential, into goodness that is no longer measured by storage but by use. This is why the one who understands the path does not cling blindly to accumulation. Accumulation has its place in worldly responsibility, yes. One must care for family, fulfill duties, and live wisely. But the heart must also know that no arrangement in this world is ultimately secure. The mistake is not having resources. The mistake is imagining that resources can save us simply because we possess them. Gold cannot bribe aging. Influence cannot silence disease. Fame cannot persuade death to skip a house. Even a strong body, admired by others, is quietly moving through the same law of decline. The flames do not discriminate. And when this truth is not deeply seen, people become strangely loyal to what is already being taken from them. They defend what they cannot keep. They exhaust their lives protecting images, positions, and comforts that were never truly theirs in the first place. They become misers inside a collapsing structure. They lock the doors from within and call it security. Yet the Dhamma says, open your eyes. If there is something valuable, bring it out. If there is merit to be made, make it while strength remains. If there is kindness to be given, give it while speech still functions, while hands still move, while the mind can still choose. This gives generosity a new emotional weight. It is no longer just about being nice. It becomes part of awakening from denial. To give is to admit something very profound. I cannot keep this forever. And if that admission is honest, it softens the heart. It humbles us. It releases us from the fantasy that ownership is ultimate. We start seeing that what passes through our hands was passing through all along. We were never absolute masters of it. At best, we were temporary custodians, entrusted for a brief period with the chance to use it well. The body itself teaches this lesson every day. It tires more easily than before. It heals more slowly than before. It surprises us with pain where there once was strength. The face changes, the back bends, memory flickers, sleep shifts, appetite changes. The body whispers impermanence long before it shouts it. And still we act shocked when the whispered becomes a command. But the wise do not wait for catastrophe to begin understanding. They train early, they reflect often. They use the ordinary changes of the body as reminders that time is not an abstraction. Time is embodied. It is happening in the knees, in the lungs, in the blood, in the skin, in the pulse. So when the Buddha gives the image of the burning house, it is not meant to terrify us into despair. It is meant to awaken urgency without panic. There is a difference. Panic freezes or confuses. Wisdom clarifies. The point is not to become morbid, but to become sincere. Not to hate the body, but to stop worshipping it as if it were permanent. Not to reject the world, but to stop asking the world to give what it cannot give. It cannot give lasting safety. It cannot give unbroken possession. It cannot give a self that never changes. Once this is seen, generosity begins to feel natural, even necessary. Then giving stops looking like loss. In worldly eyes, when you give something away, it appears smaller on your side and larger on someone else's. But in the light of Dhamma, the picture changes. If what remains unused will one day be torn away by death anyway, then clinging is the greater loss. Giving wisely is not self-impoverishment. It is the intelligent relocation of value. It is moving what can still be moved into a field where it continues as blessing, as support, as purity of intention, as a cause for future well-being. In that sense, generosity is not subtraction. It is rescue. This is also why procrastination is spiritually dangerous. Not because every delay is sinful, but because delay is often how delusion protects itself. The mind says, I will do good later. I will support the Dhamma when my finances are more comfortable. I will help people when my own life is finally settled. I will practice when retirement comes. But who has signed a contract with tomorrow? Who has been promised an unbroken body, a clear mind, favorable circumstances, and another chance? The burning house does not schedule itself around our excuses. Sometimes people think that reflecting on death will make life dark, but often it does the opposite. It makes life tender. It makes the present precious. It makes generosity immediate and alive. When you know the house is burning, every wholesome act becomes luminous. Every moment of kindness matters more. Every chance to support what is noble becomes weightier, not lighter. You stop postponing the heart. You stop living as though meaning can be indefinitely deferred. And this applies not only to money. There are many things inside the burning house. Time is there, attention is there, energy is there, forgiveness is there, knowledge is there, speech is there, encouragement is there, a listening ear is there, protection is there, service is there. If you still have the capacity to comfort someone, to share truth, to support a parent, to care for a child, to sustain a community, to preserve the teachings, to relieve another being's burden even slightly, then something valuable is still in your hands. Bring it out. Do not sit in the smoke counting what cannot follow you. For one who learns the Dhamma deeply, this becomes almost obvious. Since the body is unstable, one uses the body for merit while the body still obeys. Since speech is unstable, one uses speech for truth and kindness while the tongue still moves. Since the mind is unstable, one trains the mind while lucidity still visits. Since wealth is unstable, one turns wealth into benefit before death turns it into abandoned ownership. This is what it means to live intelligently in the face of impermanence. Not fearfully, not dramatically, simply clearly, and clarity changes the emotional atmosphere of a life. A person who sees the burning house does not become cold. Very often they become warmer, more grateful, less arrogant, less intoxicated with self-importance, more ready to share, more ready to bow to reality. Because they understand that every possession is already loosening, every relationship is vulnerable, every healthy day is a temporary gift. In that understanding, generosity is no longer forced. It becomes a sane expression of how things are. What, after all, are we trying so desperately to guard? The meal we eat is finished as soon as it is swallowed. The luxury we enjoy fades as soon as the sensation passes. The status we defend survives only in unstable opinions. Even what we call my body is changing beyond permission. So much of what we cling to is already slipping through us, while we try to name it ours. And yet a wholesome deed done with understanding, a life supported, a burden eased, a noble cause strengthened, a moment of Dhamma preserved and passed on. These are not lost in the same way. These do not vanish merely because the hand opens. In some profound sense, they are what have actually been saved. This is where the image lands in the heart. The issue is not whether the house will burn. The issue is whether we will awaken in time to carry out what matters. Whether we will continue polishing identity inside a doomed structure, or whether we will use this brief and uncertain life with intelligence, compassion, and urgency. Once that question is felt deeply, generosity is no longer sentimental. It becomes practical, courageous, and clear. And from that clarity, an old saying begins to shine with even greater force. What we consume is finished with us, but what we give may still remain. It is a small sentence, but it carries the weight of an entire way of seeing life, because it quietly reorganizes what counts as valuable, moving worth away from what is held and placing it instead on what is released. At first hearing, this can sound too simple, almost like a proverb our elders repeat at the table. But the more deeply we sit with it, the more it begins to unsettle us in a good way. When I eat, that meal ends with me. Its taste lasts a few moments, its comfort lasts a few hours. By tomorrow I will hunger again. The pleasure is real, yes, but it is brief. It rises, it satisfies, and it passes. Yet if that same food reaches someone who is weak, tired, hungry, abandoned, grieving, or unable to provide for themselves, then something more than a meal has happened. Hunger was relieved, fear was softened, trust may have been restored, and in the heart of the giver, a wholesome seed was planted. The food disappears, but the goodness does not disappear in the same way. This is what the old teaching is pointing to. It is not denying the body. It is not saying we should never eat, never spend on ourselves, never rest, never care for our own needs. That would be a misunderstanding. The body must be sustained. A lay life has duties, fatigue, responsibilities, and limits. But the teaching asks us to become honest about the difference between what ends in the instant and what continues beyond the instant. It asks us to see clearly that not all uses of wealth, effort, or opportunity carry the same depth of consequence. Think about an ordinary bowl of rice. If I eat it, it nourishes me for a while, and then it is done. There is nothing wrong with that. But if I share that bowl with someone who truly needs it, or if I provide the rice for a family that has nothing to cook that night, then the act enters another dimension. The rice still gets eaten. It still disappears materially, but morally, karmically, spiritually, it does not vanish at the same point. It continues as support, it continues as kindness, it continues as merit. And perhaps just as importantly, it continues as a reshaping of my own heart. That is one of the most beautiful things about giving. The gift leaves the hand, but it does not leave the mind unchanged. Every act of sharing trains us. It weakens the reflex that says, mine first, mine only, mine always. It loosens fear, it exposes greed, it reveals attachment. It also awakens tenderness, intelligence, and perspective. So when the wise say, what I eat is lost, what others eat remains, they are speaking not only about the external result, they are speaking about the inward transformation as well. In daily life, we can see this everywhere, if we are willing to look. A person works hard all month and spends all their extra money on fleeting indulgences. Better food, better entertainment, another purchase, another craving answered. Again, none of these things are evil by themselves. But at the end of the month, what remains? A few memories perhaps, a little pleasure already fading. Very often, the mind is not even satisfied. It is already reaching for the next thing. Compare that with someone who takes a portion of that same income and helps an elderly parent with medicine, pays school fees for a child, brings groceries to a struggling neighbor, supports a temple, prints Dhamma books, offers a meal to monastics, or quietly assists a friend who is drowning in debt and shame. The money still leaves the wallet in both cases, but the direction of its leaving is not the same, and the residue in the heart is not the same. One kind of spending collapses into immediate consumption. The other kind opens outward and continues in unseen ways. The first says, let this end with me. The second says, let this become benefit. This is why the teaching is so memorable. It takes something as ordinary as eating and turns it into a mirror for the whole of life. We can apply the same reflection to time. An evening can be consumed in distraction and vanish without trace. Or that same hour can be used to sit beside a lonely relative, to listen to someone in pain, to teach a child, to help a friend think clearly, to drive a sick person to an appointment, to clean a space others will use, to support a community effort, to encourage someone not to give up. In both cases, time passes, in both the clock moves. But not all passing is equal. Some passing is merely spent, some passing becomes merit. The same is true with energy. There are days when we use all our strength on self-concern, self-display, self-protection, self-comfort. By nightfall we are exhausted, and yet the exhaustion feels empty. Then there are days when we are tired because we served, carried, cooked, helped, taught, gave, forgave, or stayed present for another being. The body may be just as tired, perhaps even more tired, but the heart feels different. Why? Because one kind of fatigue drains, the other kind ripens. Even words can be understood in this light. A person may spend their speech on gossip, complaint, self-promotion, argument, or endless opinion. The words are gone as soon as they are spoken. Sometimes they even leave damage behind, but words used to comfort, instruct, reconcile, bless, or share truth do not disappear in the same way. They continue in memory. They continue in direction. They continue in the choices another person makes afterward. A sentence spoken at the right moment can feed someone more deeply than food, and care itself follows this same law. If all affection is confined to pleasing myself, protecting my image, and securing my own emotional advantage, then even relationships become a kind of consumption. But if care becomes giving, real giving, patient giving, wise giving, then love is no longer just a private feeling. It becomes nourishment for the world around us. It becomes one more way in which what leaves us does not truly end. This is why generosity in the Buddhist sense is not small. It is not merely about parting with objects. It is about understanding where value actually lies. A delicious meal is pleasant, but it ends quickly. A new possession excites us, but the excitement fades. Personal use has a place, but it is tied to impermanence so tightly that we should never be intoxicated by it. Shared benefit, on the other hand, carries another weight. It reaches beyond the mouth, beyond the moment, beyond the private self. That does not mean every act of giving will look dramatic. Often it is very simple. A bag of fruit left quietly at someone's door. A ride offered without being asked twice. A little money sent before the other person has to beg. A meal packed for a wojan covered. A robe offered. A book printed. A sick person visited. A burden noticed and reduced. The world often teaches us to measure value by what we keep. The Dhamma teaches us to investigate value by what becomes wholesome when it leaves us. This is a radical change of vision. It does not romanticize poverty, and it does not command reckless giving without wisdom. It simply asks, what endures more deeply, what I consumed alone, or what became relief, strength, and goodness for others? When we do not reflect on this, life slips into a quiet confusion. We become skilled at acquisition but not at meaning. We know how to increase comfort but not how to increase merit. We know how to satisfy appetite but not how to free the heart. And then years pass. Many things were enjoyed, but very little was truly converted into blessing. This is why the old saying carries such force. It wakes us up without harshness. It says gently but firmly, look again, that plate, that paycheck, that free afternoon, that spare room, that healthy body, that talent, that influence, that education, that extra resource you have, will it end with you? Or will some part of it continue as goodness? The answer does not require us to abandon ourselves. There is a middle understanding here that is very important. Caring for oneself is not opposed to generosity. Eating enough to stay healthy, resting enough to remain balanced, keeping tools necessary for work, using money for rightful responsibilities. These are not betrayals of Dhamma. The teaching is not condemning reasonable self-use. It is illuminating proportion. It is reminding us that if all our resources only circle back to ourselves, then we are investing everything in what cannot last. But if some meaningful portion of our life is directed toward benefit beyond ourselves, then we are living with intelligence. And this intelligence becomes even clearer when we consider how uncertain life is. We do not know how long we will have our strength, our income, our position, our relationships, or even our next breath. If that is true, then every opportunity to give is precious, not because giving makes us look noble, but because giving is one of the few ways temporary thing can be turned toward lasting moral consequence. Food perishes, money moves, bodies age, circumstances shift, but generosity, rightly done, leaves traces deeper than the material form of the gift. There are people whose names we do not remember, yet we live today because of what they gave. Someone planted trees they would never sit under. Someone built a school they would never attend. Someone funded a text they would never read in full. Someone fed a monk who later taught a generation. Someone supported a parent who then raised a child with stability. Someone gave blood. Someone gave land. Someone gave time. Someone gave a word of courage at the exact moment. Another soul was about to collapse. The original object is gone. The merit remains. The benefit continues. The world is still being held together by acts that materially vanished long ago. So when we hear, "What I eat is lost, what others eat remains," we should not hear it as mere poetry. We should hear it as a practical law for living. Every day, in very ordinary forms, we are deciding whether our life will mostly dissolve in private consumption, or whether part of it will become shared welfare and enduring good. A meal can teach this. A paycheck can teach this. A conversation can teach this. Even a small act, done with sincerity, can teach this. And once this principle is felt in the heart, wealth itself begins to look different. It is no longer just something to possess, protect, display, or spend. It becomes something to place wisely, something to distribute with understanding, something that if handled skillfully can fulfill duties, sustain life, and also become stored in the only way that truly matters. From here, we can begin to understand why the Buddha gave such practical guidance on how a layperson should use and divide wealth intelligently. This is where the Buddha's teaching becomes almost startlingly practical. He does not leave the layperson with vague encouragement to do good and be generous. He goes further. He gives a structure, a way of seeing wealth not as a random possession, not as a private trophy, and not as something to be spent according to impulse, fear, or vanity, but as something to be distributed with intelligence. This matters because most people are not ruined by having too little money alone. Very often they are also ruined by not understanding what money is for. In the discourses, there is a profound and grounded teaching on the wise distribution of wealth. The Buddha speaks of 4 ways a householder should use what he has. This teaching is so simple that it can be remembered easily, and yet so deep that a person could spend a lifetime growing into its meaning. These 4 uses are not merely financial categories. They are moral categories. They reveal how a human being stands in relation to the past, the present, to others, to oneself, and to the future beyond death. The first use is what we may call repaying old debts. This does not mean only money in the ordinary sense. It means honoring those from whom we have already received life, care, support, protection, guidance, or sacrifice. Above all, this points to parents, but it also includes benefactors, teachers, elders, and those whose goodness helped carry us to where we stand today. This is a deeply moving way to think about wealth, because in truth, none of us began independently. No one arrives in the world self-made. We were carried. Someone lost sleep so we could sleep. Someone worked so we could eat. Someone worried so we could grow in safety. Someone taught us words, manners, direction, restraint, and hope. Even if our life was difficult, even if our family was imperfect, still the Buddha invites us to look carefully at the debts of gratitude that exist before we ever earn our first coin. So when wealth comes into our hands, one wise use of it is to turn back toward that invisible history and say, I have not forgotten. To support one's parents, to care for them in age, to ease the burden of those who once bore ours, to assist a teacher, to repay kindness with kindness. This is not charity in the shallow sense. It is justice of the heart. It is maturity. It is a refusal to live as though one sprang up from the earth, with no roots behind them. And notice how different this is from the modern habit of treating money as a symbol of freedom from obligation. Many people think that once they earn, they owe nothing. They imagine adulthood means cutting every tie and serving only personal comfort. But in the Buddha's view, that is not maturity. It is forgetfulness. It is spiritual poverty disguised as independence. A wise person does not ask only, what do I want? A wise person also asks, who made my life possible and how should I respond? To repay old debts is therefore an act of gratitude, but not gratitude as a mere feeling. It is gratitude made visible. Gratitude that takes form in food, medicine, shelter, service, time, respect, and care. And when this is done sincerely, wealth becomes ennobled. It is no longer just purchasing power. It becomes a means of restoring balance in the moral fabric of one's life. The second use is what the old teaching describes as giving new loans. This is a beautiful expression. It refers to those whom we are now responsible for supporting in the ongoing stream of life. One's spouse, children, relatives, friends, and companions. Those who are tied to us through relationship, duty, trust, and shared dependence. Why call it a loan? Because what we give here is not thrown away. It is invested into the continuation of living bonds. A child needs food, education, protection, guidance. A spouse needs support, steadiness, reliability, care. Family and close companions sometimes need help, not because they are weak, but because life itself is fragile, uncertain, and full of seasons. To give here is to sustain the very field in which our daily life unfolds. This too is a sacred use of wealth. In Buddhist teaching, responsibility is never separate from goodness. It is not spiritually superior to neglect your family while imagining yourself generous elsewhere. There are people who can impress the public with donations and appearances of compassion, yet fail the small circle of beings who depend on them directly. The Buddha's teaching cuts through that confusion. If your home is hungry while your image is generous, something is deeply out of order. Giving new loans means recognizing that love must be fed by responsibility. Affection alone is not enough. Good intentions alone are not enough. If one has means, then one must use part of that means to secure the welfare of those one is truly bound to. This includes not only material support, but also the reliability that makes others feel safe in your presence. Wealth used in this way becomes an instrument of stability. It says to the people in your care, "You are not abandoned. Your life matters to me. I will not let my resources drift away while neglecting my duty." There is also wisdom in the image of a loan, because what we pour into children, family, and worthy relationships often returns. Not always as money, and not always immediately, but as continuity, trust, blessing, and less suffering in the world. A cared-for child may become a caring adult. A supported spouse becomes a partner in resilience. A helped relative may survive a dark period and later become a source of strength for others. Even when no direct return comes, the act is not wasted. It protects the human web we live inside. Then comes the third use, and the language here is intentionally sharp. The Buddha speaks of throwing into a deep pit. This refers to what we spend on ourselves: food, clothing, medicine, comfort, rest. The ordinary expenses of maintaining this body and life, these are necessary. They are not condemned. In fact, the teaching is realistic enough to insist that a portion of one's resources belongs to one's own upkeep. One cannot function, serve, or practice well while neglecting the body entirely. A householder has to live. A person must eat, sleep, heal, travel, and sustain the conditions of ordinary existence. But why call this throwing into a deep pit? Because whatever is spent on personal consumption, however necessary it may be, ends there. Once eaten, it is eaten. Once worn out, it is gone. Once enjoyed, it passes. It does not travel far. It does not remain in the same way. The image is not meant to shame us for using wealth on ourselves. It is meant to sober us. It reminds us not to be intoxicated by self-consumption. This is such an important correction. On the one hand, some people are indulgent and use nearly everything on personal pleasure, as though the purpose of wealth were to decorate and entertain the self until death. On the other hand, some people misunderstand renunciation and become harsh, ungenerous even to themselves, unable to use resources reasonably for health, balance, and basic dignity. The Buddha avoids both extremes. He does not deny personal use, but he places it in perspective. Yes, take care of yourself. Yes, allocate a proper share for your own needs. Yes, there must be a portion used for living this life. But understand clearly what kind of use this is. It is not the highest use. It is not the most enduring use. It is not the use that follows you beyond the body. It is necessary, but it is limited. And because it is limited, it should be guided by mindfulness, proportion, and restraint. When this is understood, a person begins to consume differently, not with guilt, but with clarity. One eats and knows, this sustains the body. One rests and knows, this supports my strength. One spends and knows, it has its place, but it is not everything. That small shift in understanding protects us from being swallowed by appetite. We stop expecting private consumption to give what it can never give: lasting security, lasting merit, lasting refuge. And then comes the fourth use, perhaps the most beautiful image of all: burying for safekeeping. In ordinary life, people bury valuables so they will not be lost. They hide what matters. They store what they hope to preserve. But in this teaching, The true safekeeping of wealth is not in vaults, accounts, land, or inheritance alone. It is in merit. It is in generosity. It is in wholesome giving. That is what is truly stored. This is where the teaching becomes luminous. What we give with a wholesome mind, what we offer for the good of others, what we dedicate through generosity, service, support of the noble, support of the needy, support of what is good and liberating. This is not lost. This is the only form of wealth that is protected against the fire of death. Everything else must be left behind. Titles are left behind. Possessions are left behind. Tastes, comforts, displays, acquisitions, all are left behind, but karma follows. Merit follows. The shaping of the heart follows. To bury wealth in this sense means to place it where decay cannot steal it in the same way. Not because coins are physically carried into another life, but because the intentional goodness woven into acts of giving becomes part of the stream of one's being. It deepens the mind in generosity. It weakens greed. It strengthens faith, tenderness, non-clinging, and concern for others. It creates conditions for future well-being. It becomes a store that is not visible to the world, but deeply real in the law of cause and effect. This is why making merit is not sentimental excess. It is intelligent preservation. The worldly mind sees giving as reduction. If I give, I have less. But the Dhamma eye begins to see something subtler. If I only cling, I lose almost everything anyway. If I give wisely, something of true value is secured. In this way, generosity is not merely noble. It is practical in the deepest sense. And notice how complete this fourfold structure is. One part turns to the past with gratitude. One part attends to the present network of responsibility. One part sustains one's own life with realism. One part reaches beyond death through merit. Nothing essential is ignored. We are not told to become reckless with wealth, nor are we told to worship it. We are taught to place it, to distribute it in a way that makes life upright, balanced, and meaningful. If a person remembers only these four uses, much confusion can already fall away. Before spending, one can quietly ask, is this helping me repay old debts? Is this supporting the people I am bound to care for? Is this simply for my own maintenance? Is this being stored in the only safe place, through merit and goodness? These questions can change an entire life. They bring dignity to earning and wisdom to spending. And perhaps most importantly, this teaching rescues generosity from being treated as something optional and decorative. Making merit is not an afterthought for when everything else is done. Gratitude is not an extra. Responsibility is not a burden added on top of life. These are life rightly understood. Wealth becomes wholesome when it moves through these channels. Otherwise, it too easily becomes fuel for delusion, conflict, vanity, and fear. So the issue is not simply whether one has much or little. The deeper issue is whether what one has is being used with understanding. Even a modest income handled wisely can become a source of blessing. Even great wealth, handled foolishly, can become a cause of suffering. The measure is not only quantity, it is direction, it is intention, it is moral clarity. And once these four uses are established in our understanding, another question naturally begins to arise. Even among people who all possess wealth, not everyone relates to it in the same way. Some cling tightly, some give carelessly, some give beautifully, some spend on themselves generously but shrink from helping others. Some are hard on themselves but open-handed toward the world. So, after seeing the wise outer framework for distributing wealth, the next step is to look more closely at the different inner styles by which human beings relate to wealth itself. So now we come to something very intimate, very revealing. Two people may earn the same amount, own the same kind of house, wear the same kind of clothes, and still be living from two completely different worlds inside. Wealth does not only show us what a person has, it shows us how that person feels about life, about security, about love, about loss, about death, and even about themselves. The way a person spends, keeps, shares, withholds, or sacrifices is not random. It comes from a view, it comes from a heart habit. It comes from the quiet beliefs they carry every day, without even naming them. The old teaching speaks very simply, but it cuts deeply. There are people who are broad toward themselves and narrow toward others. There are people who are narrow toward themselves and broad toward others. There are people who are broad toward both themselves and others. And there are people who are narrow toward both. At first, this may sound like a simple moral classification, but if we listen carefully, it becomes a mirror. Somewhere in these four, we begin to see our own face. The first kind is the person who is generous to themselves but restrictive toward others. This is a very common pattern, and because it is common, it often escapes criticism. This person does not hesitate to spend on personal comfort, personal taste, personal pleasure, personal image, personal convenience. When it comes to their own cravings, their reasoning becomes flexible. Their standards become soft. Their hand opens easily. But when another person is in need, when a parent grows old, when a friend is struggling, when a good cause appears, suddenly caution arises. Suddenly they become analytical, skeptical, and tight. Suddenly every dollar must be justified. This way of living is not always loud or cruel. Sometimes it appears polished, successful, even respectable. A person may speak kindly, dress well, live well, and still have a heart that contracts whenever giving is asked of it. They may say, "I worked hard for this." They may say, "People should take care of themselves." They may say, "I am not responsible for everyone." On the surface, some of those statements contain truth, but underneath, there may be something smaller and sadder. A heart that feels safest when everything circles back to me. What drives this pattern? Often it is not simply selfishness in the crude sense. Sometimes it is fear disguised as self-care. Sometimes it is vanity disguised as refinement. Sometimes it is insecurity that tries to soothe itself by acquiring more, upgrading more, surrounding itself with layers of comfort and signals of importance. The person feels hungry inside, and so they keep feeding the self. But the strange thing is, the more a life revolves around self-serving consumption, the less full the heart becomes. It may become more decorated, but not more peaceful. In Dhamma terms, this pattern reveals a deep misunderstanding of ownership. The person behaves as if what has come to them is truly theirs in an ultimate sense, as if it exists mainly for personal use and personal extension. They forget that wealth is unstable, borrowed for a time, and always already on its way elsewhere. The body will fail, conditions will change. Everything one now calls mine will one day be in another hand, another house, another story. To cling to wealth only as a servant of the self is to use a temporary tool in the narrowest possible way. And yet, before judging this person too harshly, we should look carefully at ourselves. How often do we loosen quickly for appetite, but tighten instantly for compassion? How often do we spend without fatigue on preference, but feel burdened by requests that carry no personal pleasure? How often does the mind become generous when the self is the recipient, and philosophical when another person is in need? This is why the teaching matters. It is not there to condemn. It is there to expose hidden asymmetry in the heart. The second kind is the person who is narrow toward themselves but broad toward others. This type often moves us. There is something noble here, something beautiful. This is the mother who goes without, so the children can eat well. This is the father who wears old clothes while paying school fees. This is the friend who quietly helps another through a hard season while asking for nothing. This is the donor who does not mind personal inconvenience if it means some good can be done. There is tenderness in this way of living. There is sincerity. There is sacrifice. Sometimes there is great merit in it. Such people may eat simply, live simply, and deny themselves many comforts, not because they hate life, but because the suffering of others touches them more strongly than their own wants. Their happiness comes from seeing another person relieved, protected, nourished, encouraged. In a world obsessed with personal entitlement, this kind of heart can feel like fresh water. It reminds us that love is real, that decency still exists, that human life does not have to revolve around self-maximization. But even here, the Buddha's teaching invites wisdom, not sentimentality, because what is beautiful can also become imbalanced. A person can be so harsh toward themselves that what looks like generosity is mixed with hidden confusion. They may feel guilty whenever they receive. They may believe their own needs do not matter. They may neglect rest, health, emotional stability, or rightful responsibilities. They may burn themselves down in the name of goodness. Outwardly, it looks admirable. Inwardly, it may be unsustainable. Sometimes this pattern is rooted not only in compassion, but also in low self-worth. A person may have learned, somewhere deep in childhood or through painful life experience, that others matter more than they do. So they become generous, but not from freedom. They give from erasure. They care for others while quietly abandoning themselves. This is not yet the middle way. It is still a form of imbalance. The Dhamma never teaches hatred toward oneself. It teaches non-clinging, wisdom and compassion that includes all beings, beginning right here with the life one has been given to steward. So when a person is narrow toward themselves and broad toward others, we should honor the goodness, but we should also ask, is this guided by wisdom? Is this sustainable? Does this giving strengthen the path, or does it weaken the one who must walk it? If care for others causes one to neglect the body completely, ignore one's duties, fall into exhaustion or support dependency without discernment, then generosity has become separated from understanding. It still has goodness, but it is incomplete. The third kind is the person who is broad with both self and others. This can be the most balanced and wholesome pattern when it is guided well. Such a person knows how to enjoy what is rightfully theirs without guilt, and also knows how to share without hesitation. They are not stingy with the world. They understand that resources are to be used, not worshipped, circulated, not frozen, enjoyed, not clung to. They can feed their family well, maintain their health, create stability at home, and still open their hand to parents, teachers, friends, strangers, and worthy causes. There is a kind of maturity in this. It says, I do not need to punish myself to be virtuous, and I do not need to neglect others to enjoy what I have. This person may understand proportion. They may know how to care for the body as a vehicle, the home as a place of peace, relationships as fields of gratitude, and generosity as a natural expression of non-ownership. Because of that, wealth becomes a means of harmony rather than a cause of conflict. When guided by mindfulness and wisdom, being broad with both self and others can reflect a healthy heart. There is gladness in giving, but also sanity in living. There is delight, but not intoxication. There is comfort, but not slavery to comfort. There is charity, but not recklessness. This kind of person may enjoy good food, but also feed the hungry. They may maintain a beautiful home, but also support the Dhamma. They may save responsibly, care for loved ones, and still remember that death can arrive at any time. So they use wealth with both warmth and clarity. But this third pattern also has a danger. If wisdom is weak, broadness toward both can slowly turn into indulgence toward both. A person may tell themselves they are simply being generous, when in fact they lack discipline. They may spend freely on themselves and give freely to others, but without reflection, without priorities, without understanding consequences. They may mistake emotional ease for moral beauty. They may become careless in the name of kindness, or extravagant in the name of abundance. It is possible to be broad with everyone and still be unwise. One may spoil children instead of training them, fund harmful habits instead of relieving suffering, support flattering personalities instead of worthy recipients, and exhaust one's means without building anything stable or wholesome. In that case, the hand is open, but the eye is closed, and open-handedness without discernment does not complete the perfection of giving. It only scatters resources. That is why the teaching never stops at the appearance of generosity. It asks about the mind behind it. Is there wisdom? Is there understanding of timing, measure, recipient, and consequence? Is this giving reducing greed, hatred, and delusion? Or is it merely following emotion, image, pressure, or impulse? The same outward act can carry very different inner qualities. Then there is the fourth kind, the person who is narrow toward both themselves and others. This is perhaps the most painful pattern because it is not only ungenerous, it is contracted at the root. Such a person does not let wealth serve life. They serve wealth. They do not enjoy it well, and they do not share it well. They deprive themselves, and they deprive others. They hold tightly, calculate constantly, mistrust easily, and relax rarely. Their life may appear disciplined from the outside, but often underneath there is fear, dryness, and scarcity consciousness. This person may save but never feel secure. They may possess much and still feel poor. They may deny themselves simple comforts, not from wisdom or ascetic training, but from inability to let go. They may resent the needs of others, avoid situations where giving might be requested, and feel anxious whenever anything leaves their control. Even receiving love can be difficult for them, because receiving creates a subtle obligation, and obligation feels dangerous to a guarded heart. What drives this contraction? Usually some mixture of fear and wrong view. Fear of the future, fear of dependence, fear of being used, fear that there will never be enough. Sometimes there is also a deep emotional memory of deprivation, humiliation, or instability. The person has learned to survive by clenching, and after many years, clenching no longer feels like a reaction. It feels like identity, but a clenched life is a small life. Even if the bank account grows, the heart shrinks. Even if possessions increase, trust does not. Such a person often lives as though existence were only a battlefield of loss prevention. Nothing becomes offering. Nothing becomes gratitude. Nothing becomes merit. Wealth remains locked in the field of anxiety. It cannot ripen into generosity because the mind cannot release the illusion that holding is the same thing as safety. And this is where the teaching becomes so compassionate. It does not merely say, be more generous. It asks us to see the suffering hidden inside our pattern. The one broad to self but narrow to others suffers from self-centered hunger. The one narrow to self but broad to others may suffer from imbalance or self-erasure. The one broad to both may flourish beautifully or drift into carelessness. The one narrow to both suffers from contraction and fear. In every case, the issue is not money alone. The issue is view, intention, and the training of the heart. So when we hear these four types, we are not meant to sort other people into boxes and feel superior. We are meant to become honest. Where do I open easily and where do I close? What kind of spending makes me cheerful and what kind of giving makes me resistant? Do I know how to care for myself without worshipping myself? Do I know how to help others without abandoning wisdom? Do I know the difference between generosity and impulse, between frugality and fear, between sacrifice and confusion? Once these questions become alive, the discussion naturally deepens, because after recognizing the outer pattern of how wealth is held, another and even more decisive issue appears. Generosity by itself is not the whole story. Two people may both give, and yet the quality of their giving may be worlds apart. One gives with wisdom, another gives without wisdom. One gives with understanding, another gives with mere good intention. And from this point, we must turn inward even further, to the critical distinction between merit accompanied by wisdom and merit separated from it. And this is where the teaching becomes both subtle and deeply practical. It is not enough to say, I believe, and it is not enough to say, I have a good heart. In the Buddha's way, faith is beautiful, but faith by itself is not yet complete. Faith must walk together with wisdom. If devotion has no understanding, it can become blind. If kindness has no discernment, it can become wasteful, confused, even harmful. But when faith and wisdom support each other, then merit becomes bright, stable, and deeply transformative. In the language of the Abhidhamma, wholesome action is not measured only by what appears on the outside. Two people may place the same offering into the same hands. Two people may say the same words, bow in the same way, give the same amount, even smile with the same tenderness. Yet inwardly, the mental quality can be completely different. One act of goodness may be joined with wisdom, another may be separated from wisdom. Outwardly they look alike. Inwardly they belong to different worlds. This distinction is so important because many people are content with sincerity alone. They feel that as long as the heart is soft, that is enough. But the Dhamma asks for something more mature. A soft heart is precious, yes, but a clear mind is also precious. A generous impulse is good, yes, but right understanding gives that impulse direction, depth, and power. Otherwise, goodness remains fragile. It remains shallow. It may still bear fruit, but not the fullest fruit it could have borne. So what is merit without wisdom? It is still merit. We should not despise it. We should not mock it. We should not become arrogant and think that every simple act of kindness is somehow inferior. No. If someone gives because they feel compassion, if someone helps because they cannot bear another person's suffering, if someone offers food, medicine, clothing, time, labor, or care with a genuinely kind heart, there is goodness there, there is beauty there, there is wholesome karma there. But if that goodness is not supported by understanding, the tradition calls it wholesome action not accompanied by wisdom. What does that mean in living terms? It means there is goodness, but not yet clarity. It means there is sincerity, but not yet reflection. It means there is kindness, but not yet a deep grounding in hearing the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma, and cultivating the Dhamma. In other words, there is heart, but the heart has not yet been trained to see deeply. A person may give because everyone around them gives. They may offer because they were told, do this and you will get blessings. They may act out of emotion, out of habit, out of family tradition, out of fear of misfortune, out of admiration for others, or simply because they feel moved in the moment. Again, none of this is evil. Some of it may be very good. But if the person has not really examined what giving is, what attachment is, what intention is, what suffering is, what truly supports liberation, then the act remains wholesome without wisdom. Sometimes merit without wisdom appears in a very innocent form. A person sees someone hungry and immediately shares their food. A child sees another child crying and offers a toy. An elderly woman gives alms every morning because she has done so for 40 years, and her heart becomes peaceful when she does it. These are not small things. The world is kept alive by such acts. But from the deeper perspective of the Dhamma, these actions may still not be joined with wisdom if they arise without understanding, without clear reflection, without insight into causes and conditions. It is possible to be morally beautiful and still not yet wise. That is a hard truth for the ego, but a liberating truth for the practitioner, because if we do not understand this, we stop growing. We say, I am a good person, therefore I am complete. But goodness is the beginning, not the end. The Buddha never told us to abandon goodness. He taught us to refine it, to purify it, to illuminate it from within. Merit without wisdom can also be unstable. Today I give because I feel inspired. Tomorrow I refuse because I feel offended. Today I help because my mood is generous. Tomorrow I withdraw because no one thanked me. Today I contribute because others are watching. Tomorrow I become stingy because I think my act was not appreciated. Do you see? The kindness is real, but it is still vulnerable to praise and blame. to excitement and disappointment, to imitation and pressure. It has not yet been anchored in understanding, and because it lacks wisdom, this kind of merit may also be misdirected. A person may support what is unwholesome while believing they are doing good. They may encourage to and call it compassion. They may waste resources carelessly and call it generosity. They may give to feed vanity, to gain approval, to quiet guilt, or to purchase a spiritual identity. Outwardly they are giving. Inwardly, many strands are mixed together. There is some goodness, yes, but there is also confusion. This is why wisdom matters so much. Wisdom protects goodness from losing its way. Now consider the other form, merit accompanied by wisdom. This is wholesome action joined with understanding. This is generosity informed by learning, strengthened by thoughtful discernment, and matured through inner development. Here, a person does not merely give because giving feels good. They give because they have begun to understand life. They understand impermanence. They understand that possessions cannot be held forever. They understand that clinging contracts the heart, and that generosity loosens that contraction. They understand that intention shapes karma. They understand that where, why, and how one gives all matter. And because of this, their goodness becomes more intelligent, more stable, and more powerful. This kind of merit is not cold and analytical. Wisdom in the Buddhist sense does not dry out the heart. It does not turn generosity into mathematics. Rather, it makes generosity more alive. It helps the giver see what truly benefits, what truly harms, what nourishes wholesome qualities, what strengthens delusion, and what supports the path. Wisdom does not replace compassion. It guides compassion so that compassion can reach its fullest strength. To understand merit with wisdom, we can remember the traditional movement of learning, reflection, and cultivation. First, there is hearing or learning. A person listens to the teaching. They hear about karma, intention, non-attachment, compassion, right view, and the nature of wholesome action. They do not remain limited to emotion alone. They allow the Dhamma to educate the heart. Then comes reflection. They do not merely repeat what they heard. They ask, is this true in my own life? When I cling, what happens to my mind? When I give, what happens to fear? What kind of giving creates humility? What kind of giving secretly feeds conceit? What kind of support actually helps another person grow? Reflection turns borrowed teachings into living understanding, and then comes cultivation. What has been heard and reflected on is practiced again and again. The person observes the mind before giving, during giving, and after giving. They notice attachment, hesitation, pride, joy, resistance, tenderness, and expectation. They train not only the hand that gives, but the mind that releases. Over time, giving becomes less about transaction and more about transformation, less about my generosity and more about freedom from possessiveness, less about gaining merit as a possession and more about purifying the stream of intention. This is merit with wisdom. It is not merely doing good. It is doing good with understanding. It is not merely being kind. It is being kind while seeing clearly. It is not merely offering something away. It is offering while knowing why one gives, what one is weakening in oneself, what one is strengthening in oneself, and what conditions one is helping create in the world. A person acting with wisdom may still give with warmth and simplicity. They may still place a meal into someone's hands with a smile and say nothing sophisticated at all. But inwardly there is clarity. They understand that the body is fragile, wealth is temporary, relationships are uncertain, and death can arrive without warning. They know that holding too tightly leads to suffering. They know that generosity is not a performance, but a training in non-clinging. Because of that understanding, even a small act can become profound. The difference, then, is not between a grand donor and a modest donor. It is not between the rich and the poor. It is not between those who know many religious words and those who do not. The difference lies in whether the goodness is illuminated by insight. A poor person with clear understanding may perform merit with wisdom. A wealthy person making spectacular donations may still be acting without wisdom. The Dhamma always returns us to the quality of mind, and this should make us humble, because most of us are mixed. Very few acts are perfectly pure. We give with kindness, but also with expectation. We help with sincerity, but also with self-image. We offer with faith, but sometimes without enough understanding. At other times, understanding is present but not yet steady. So this teaching is not given to divide people into superior and inferior. It is given so that we can refine ourselves honestly. We begin where we are, and we learn to add wisdom to faith, clarity to kindness, discernment to devotion. When wisdom joins merit, the act becomes more than socially good. It becomes spiritually fertile. It supports not only favorable results in the future, but also present purification. The giver is changed while giving. The heart becomes lighter. The grip of mind softens. Intention becomes cleaner. Discernment becomes sharper. Compassion becomes more skillful. Such merit has depth because it is connected not only to kindness, but to truth. And when wisdom is absent, the merit is still not lost. This must be said carefully and compassionately. The Buddha did not teach this distinction to discourage ordinary goodness. He taught it to elevate it. Better to give with wisdom than to be cruel. Better to help imperfectly than to be indifferent. Better to begin with simple kindness than to wait for perfect understanding and never act at all. But if we truly love the Dhamma, we do not stop at simple kindness. We let kindness increase. We let generosity become wise. So faith must walk together with wisdom. Faith opens the hand. Wisdom opens the eye. Faith gives energy, tenderness, and reverence. Wisdom gives direction, proportion, and penetration. I want to do good. Wisdom asks, what is truly good here? Faith says, I want to give. Wisdom asks, how can this giving become pure, skillful, and beneficial? When these two walk together, merit becomes beautiful in a deeper sense. It becomes not only an offering to others, but also a training of the mind on the path. And once this distinction is understood, even in a preliminary way, another great truth begins to make sense. Not all acts of giving ripen in the same way. Not all generosity carries the same weight. Not all offerings produce the same kind of karmic result. Because from here, we are ready to see more clearly that the fruit of giving depends on many conditions: the quality of the giver's mind, the presence or absence of wisdom, and also the nature of the one who receives. Once we understand that giving is not measured only by the object placed into someone's hands, a very subtle and important truth opens up. Generosity is real, goodness is real, and merit is real. But their results do not unfold in one flat, mechanical way. The same amount of money can be given in two different moments and become two very different karmic events. The same bowl of food can nourish two people in the visible world, yet create very different invisible conditions in the life of the giver. And this is exactly why the Buddha's teaching on giving is deeper than common morality. It does not deny kindness. It refines it. There are many ways to distribute wealth. There are many ways to share one's time, strength, care, knowledge, and protection. There are many ways to live as a human being. Some people spend almost everything on themselves and give only what is left over. Some deprive themselves but are open-hearted toward others. Some are balanced and responsible, taking care of themselves while also knowing how to support family, community, and noble causes. Some cling tightly to everything and live in fear whether they are rich or poor. If lives are different, if minds are different, if relationships to wealth are different, then how could the fruit of giving be exactly the same in every case? This is where discernment becomes necessary. We are not being invited to become calculating in a cold way. We are not being taught to rank human worth as though some lives mattered and others did not. The Buddha never taught contempt. He taught clarity. He taught us to see that karma functions according to causes and conditions. If causes differ, results. If the field in which a seed is planted differs, growth differs. If the state of the giver's mind differs, the energy of the act differs. If the recipient differs in moral and spiritual quality, that too becomes part of the karmic texture of the offering. So when the tradition says that giving to a virtuous person is not the same as giving to an unvirtuous person, this must be heard carefully, with tenderness and intelligence. It does not mean that the hungry should be ignored if they are flawed. It does not mean that compassion should be reserved only for the holy. It does not mean we love one person more and another less. It means that karma is precise. The ethical goodness of helping someone in need remains goodness, but the karmic field generated through that act is not identical in all cases, because the recipient is not just a mouth to be fed or a hand to be filled. The recipient is also a living field of qualities, habits, virtue, intention, and spiritual resonance. Imagine rain falling on different kinds of land. The rain itself is generous, but one field has been prepared, cleaned, softened, and made fertile. Another is rocky, another is full of weeds, another is poisoned. The rain is still rain. It still gives life where it can, yet what grows will not be the same everywhere. In the same way, an offering made towards someone whose life is shaped by restraint, gratitude, humility, wisdom, and practice enters a different field than an offering made towards someone who uses what is received to feed greed, intoxication, violence, or delusion. In both cases, the giver may be doing something kind, but the karmic echo is not identical, because the conditions receiving that kindness are not identical. This can be difficult for modern ears, because many of us have been taught that all giving must be treated as spiritually equal in order to remain morally pure. But the Buddha's teaching is more nuanced than that. Equality of compassion does not require sameness of karmic result. We can wish well for all beings and still understand that supporting different beings supports different qualities in the world. If I offer food to someone starving, that is a beautiful thing. If I support a person of deep virtue who preserves the Dhamma, teaches truth, lives harmlessly, and inspires countless others toward awakening, that too is beautiful, but it carries a different range of consequences. Not because one person is more human than another, but because one act sustains a larger current of goodness and wisdom. This is why the recipient matters partly by virtue, and partly by what we may call spiritual nature or spiritual function. A person's inner quality is not a small detail in karma. Someone who lives carelessly and destructively receives an offering in one way. Someone who lives with discipline and noble intention receives it in another. Someone who has cultivated generosity, morality, collectedness, understanding, and compassion becomes, in a sense, a clearer channel through which the goodness of the act can deepen and widen. What is offered to such a person does not end with the person. It becomes connected to a life aligned with Dhamma, and therefore to a broader field of blessing. In the teachings, this principle is stated quite directly. If one desires merit related to a certain strength or excellence, one may offer to those who are strong in that quality. This is not superstition. It is not transactional spirituality in a crude sense. It is a law of affinity. We become shaped by what we revere, by what we support, by the qualities toward which our heart bends. When we give with faith toward wisdom, that giving strengthens our relationship to wisdom. When we give with reverence toward deep practice, that giving helps tune the mind toward deep practice. When we offer to those who embody learning, discipline, meditation, compassion, or teaching, the mind is not only parting with an object, it is also choosing its direction. So, if one offers to a great teacher of Dhamma, one may naturally incline the heart toward understanding, clarity, and the preservation of truth. If one offers to a meditation master, one may naturally incline the heart towards stillness, insight, and inward discipline. If one offers to those who care tirelessly for the sick, one strengthens tenderness and compassion. If one offers to those who uphold morality under difficult conditions, one strengthens respect for integrity. Karma is not just about external transfer, it is about what the heart aligns itself with while giving. There is an old question preserved in the tradition, where a Brahmin asks the Buddha something very revealing. He says, in effect, "I have made offerings to the Buddha, and I have made offerings to the Sangha. How can I make an offering to the Dhamma?" It is a beautiful question, because it shows a mind beginning to understand refinement. The Buddha then asks him, "Among the monks, who do you know to be the one who has retained and borne the teaching most fully?" And the answer given is Venerable Ananda. In that exchange, a profound principle appears without noise. To honor the Dhamma is not only to honor a book, a sound, or an idea. It is to support the living bearer of the teaching, the one in whom the teaching is held, remembered, protected, and transmitted. This shows us again that the value of giving is not exhausted by the material item. A robe, a meal, a shelter, a medicine, or even a small practical support can become part of something immense when offered into the right field. The visible object may be modest, but the invisible network of conditions it enters may be vast. To support one who preserves truth is not merely to help one individual survive another day. It may be to help wisdom remain alive in the world for countless unseen beings. Still, this teaching must be held with compassion, or it can be misunderstood. Discernment about recipients should never harden into pride. It should never become an excuse for indifference. There are times when someone stands before us in immediate suffering, and the right response is to help. Hunger does not wait for a philosophical ranking. Illness does not wait for our spiritual analysis. Fear does not wait for our theories of merit. In such moments, kindness is the Dhamma. One gives because suffering is there. One helps because one can. And yet, even while remaining compassionate, one can also remain wise. Not every act of support should be blind. If what I give will directly strengthen addiction, cruelty, deceit, or harm, then wisdom asks me to reconsider the form of my generosity. Perhaps I still help, but in a different way. Perhaps I feed but do not fund destruction. Perhaps I protect, but do not participate in delusion. Perhaps I offer medicine instead of money, presence instead of indulgence, truth instead of sentimental weakness. In this, generosity remains warm, but not foolish. It remains open, but not undiscerning. The Buddha's way is often like this, neither hard nor soft in the worldly sense, but deeply skillful. He does not flatten reality in order to soothe us. He teaches us to see more carefully so that goodness can become more powerful, more mature, and more liberating. If all giving produced the same result regardless of motive, wisdom, recipient, and context, then karma would be crude. But karma is not crude, it is delicate. It records not only that something was done, but how it was done, why it was done, toward whom it was done, and what qualities were strengthened through it. This means that when we give, we are not only moving resources, we are shaping a future. We are participating in a moral architecture that is far more intricate than simple social approval. A careless person may give much and still create limited fruit. A thoughtful person may give little, but with reverence, clarity, and proper direction, and the result may become unexpectedly deep. A gift offered into a noble field with a lucid and joyful mind does not vanish when the object is used up. It continues as a cause, and from here the teaching becomes even more refined. If the fruit of generosity can vary according to the moral and spiritual quality of the recipient, then naturally another question arises. If one wishes to cultivate a certain kind of blessing, strength, or excellence, how should one give? To whom should one offer? What qualities in the recipient become a support for specific kinds of merit in the giver? Once this principle is understood with care, without arrogance and without confusion, the path opens toward a subtler teaching, giving not only with kindness, but with wise intention directed toward the qualities one hopes to grow. Once this is understood, generosity is no longer seen as a random act, and it is no longer reduced to the shallow idea that one merely gives something away in order to become rich in some future life. The Buddha's teaching goes much deeper than that. Giving has texture, giving has direction, giving has weight. And one of the more subtle things taught in the tradition is this: if a person wishes merit to become especially strong in a certain dimension, then one gives toward that dimension. One supports that quality where it is already alive, established, and radiant in another. This does not mean bargaining with goodness. It does not mean treating merit like a marketplace. It means understanding cause and effect with maturity. It means recognizing that the heart is shaped by where it bows, what it admires, what it chooses to nourish, and what kind of excellence it draws near to. If I repeatedly support confusion, coarseness, vanity, or mere display, then even if I call it giving, the mind involved is still being trained by those associations. But if I support virtue, learning, restraint, compassion, concentration, or wisdom, then my act of giving is not only a transfer of material support, it is an inward alignment. It is a declaration of value. It is the heart saying, "This is what I honor. This is what I want to stand closer to. This is the kind of light I do not want to let go out." This is why the fruit of giving is said to vary according to the recipient. Not all fields are equal. Not all acts of support carry the same moral resonance. The teaching is not inviting us to become proud, calculating, or cold. It is inviting us to become discerning. There is a huge difference between giving with wisdom and giving without reflection. One may still gain merit through simple kindness, of course. A compassionate impulse is never small, but when kindness is joined with understanding, the act becomes more complete. It is no longer only generous, it becomes skillful. In the old teaching, it is clearly said that if one wants merit to become powerful in a particular way, one offers to one who is especially strong in that very quality. This is a profound point, and it deserves to be heard carefully. If there is someone whose life is deeply rooted in study, transmission, preservation, and explanation of the Dhamma, then offering to such a person is not the same as offering in a general way, without any clear direction of mind. If there is someone deeply established in meditation, in inward training, in collectedness, in silence, in the direct work of the heart, then supporting such a person carries a different shade, a different flavor, a different karmic inclination. The difference is not because one person is being ranked like an object in a worldly contest. It is because qualities matter. The Dhamma takes form in living beings through different strengths. One person may be remarkable in learning, memory, articulation, and the preservation of teachings. Another may be remarkable in renunciation, stillness, insight, and the power of meditative cultivation. Another may be outstanding in compassion and service. Another in moral purity. Another in patient endurance. When one gives with clear recognition of these qualities, and when one's own aspiration is harmonized with what one is supporting, then the act becomes more internally coherent. The mind, the object, the recipient, and the aspiration begin to point in the same direction. This is why the source material says that the fruit of giving depends partly on the virtue of the recipient, but also partly on the Dhamma nature, or Dhamma quality, present in that person. That is a very refined way to put it. It is not only a matter of whether the person is morally good or morally bad. That matters greatly, yes. But beyond that, what aspect of the path has become especially alive in them? What have they cultivated? What have they protected with their life? What current of the teaching is especially strong in them? The result of giving is conditioned not only by goodness in a general sense, but also by the spiritual characteristics present in the field where that giving is planted. Think of it almost like planting a seed near a certain climate. The seed is yours. The intention is yours. The moral responsibility is yours. But conditions matter. The surrounding environment matters. If one offers to a Dhamma teacher, one may make the offering with the aspiration, may understanding grow in me, may I gain clarity, may right view deepen, may I come closer to the truth that liberates. This does not mean the teacher hands over wisdom like a physical object. It means the giver's act is directed toward the living stream of teaching, learning, hearing, remembering, and understanding. The heart bends toward illumination through knowledge of the path. And if one offers to a meditation master, one may form a different aspiration. May my mind become steady. May mindfulness mature. May concentration strengthen. May I one day know stillness, direct seeing, and inward freedom. Again, the offering is not a magical transaction. It is not superstition. It is not that one purchases meditation by means of alms. Rather, one is consciously aligning one's generosity with a field in which meditative discipline, collectedness, and contemplative realization are especially alive. The mind of the giver is quietly shaped by reverence for those qualities. In this sense, giving becomes deeply educational. It teaches the giver what to admire. It reveals what the giver truly longs for. It exposes whether one is seeking appearance or depth, praise or transformation, sentiment or awakening. Many people give, but not everyone pauses to examine the state of mind from which they give, and the qualities they are inwardly saluting through that act. A gift can leave the hand, while greed still remains in the heart. A gift can leave the hand while vanity is secretly asking to be seen. A gift can leave the hand while fear is hoping to buy safety. But a gift can also leave the hand with humility, gratitude, clarity, and aspiration. Outwardly, two offerings may look similar. Inwardly, they may be worlds apart. This is why intention matters so much. In Buddhist teaching, intention is never a side detail, it is central. What one means by the act, how clearly one sees the act, and what kind of emotional tone fills the mind while giving. All of this shapes the moral texture of what is being done. If one gives with reverence, the mind becomes soft and uplifted. If one gives with clarity, the act becomes steady and unconfused. If one gives with a wise aspiration, the heart is already training itself in direction, not just emotion. And if one gives while honoring noble qualities in the recipient, one's own mind is quietly receiving an imprint from what it reveres. Reverence, then, is not blind submission. It is a beautiful sensitivity to what deserves honor. In a world where so much admiration is wasted on glamour, noise, status, and self-promotion, the ability to revere virtue is itself a rare blessing. To recognize someone who carries the Dhamma sincerely, whether through teaching, meditation, restraint, or compassionate living, is already a sign that one's own heart is not entirely asleep. And to support such a person with a clean and joyful mind is to participate in the continuity of the good. One is not merely helping a person. One is helping preserve a quality that the world desperately needs. Clarity is equally important. Without clarity, people may give and still remain confused about what they are doing. They may think that quantity alone determines merit. They may assume that emotional excitement is the same as wholesome intention. They may imagine that any religious-looking act automatically produces the same result. But the teaching asks us to slow down and become more precise. To whom am I giving? What is alive in this person? What is my mind doing right now? What quality do I genuinely wish to strengthen in myself? Am I giving with joy, with trust, with wisdom, with steadiness? Or am I giving to satisfy pressure, imitation, fear, or social habit? When clarity enters, giving stops being mechanical. It becomes awake. It becomes relational in the deepest sense, because one is not only relating to another human being, one is relating to qualities, to values, to the path itself as it appears in human form. And then generosity becomes much more than release of possessions. It becomes a form of inner orientation. It says, "May I not live carelessly. May I not praise the wrong things. May I not spend my life strengthening what is shallow while neglecting what is liberating." At the same time, this teaching must be held with humility. It is not for judging others harshly. It is not for creating a prideful hierarchy in the mind. A person with little understanding may still give beautifully out of simple love. A person with much learning may still give poorly, with conceit and calculation. So discernment must always be joined with tenderness. Wisdom must not become arrogance. The point is not to make the heart hard. The point is to make the heart intelligent. And an intelligent heart understands that giving is never only about the thing given. The object matters, yes, because real support requires real sacrifice. But what carries the deepest moral force is the whole constellation surrounding the act. The intention before giving, the respect felt during giving, the understanding of who is being supported, and the aspiration formed in connection with that support. This is why one offering can become small and another vast, even if the material difference between them is not great. The mind determines so much. So when the tradition says that one who seeks a certain kind of blessing should give toward one who is strong in that blessing, it is pointing us toward a subtle law of affinity. The heart grows in the direction it honors. Merit becomes colored by the values it serves. Generosity does not float in emptiness. It lands somewhere, and where it lands matters. This understanding opens the way to a very beautiful question, one that appears in the scriptures themselves. If offerings made to the Buddha bear one kind of fruit, and offerings made to the Sangha bear another, then what would it mean to make an offering to the Dharma itself? That question, simple on the surface yet profound underneath, leads naturally into the story of the Brahmin who came before the Blessed One and asked exactly that. And that is why the Brahmin's question is so moving. It is not merely a question about ritual. It is not a technical question about where to place a gift. It is the question of someone who has begun to see that not all giving is the same, and that intention alone, while crucial, is not the whole picture. He had already made offerings to the Buddha. He had already made offerings to the Sangha, but now another longing arose in him, more refined, more subtle. He wanted to know how one offers to the Dhamma. Just pause with that for a moment, because it is a beautiful question. How do you offer to the Buddha? That seems simple enough. You bring robes, food, medicine, shelter, or whatever support is needed. How do you offer to the Sangha? Again, that seems understandable. You support the community of monastics, those who have gone forth, those who live the training. But the Dhamma is not a person standing in front of you with a bowl in hand. The Dhamma cannot be fed rice in the way a monk can be fed rice. It cannot be clothed in the way a body can be clothed. So what does it mean, in a real and meaningful sense, to make an offering to the Dhamma? This is where the Buddha's response becomes so luminous. The Brahmin came and said, "In essence, I have given to the Buddha, I have given to the Sangha. How can I give to the Dhamma?" And the Buddha did not answer in an abstract philosophical way. He did not turn the question into a vague idea. Instead, he brought the Brahmin's attention back to something very concrete, very living, very human. He asked, "Among the monks, as far as you know, who is the one who retains and remembers the teachings most fully?" That question itself is already an answer, though only a wise listener would catch it at once. The Brahmin replied, "Venerable Ananda." And with that he understood. Why? Because the Buddha was showing him that the Dhamma does not float in the air, as a concept disconnected from people. The teaching survives in living vessels. It is preserved through memory, through recitation, through understanding, through practice, through faithful transmission. If the Dhamma is to remain in the world, it must be held somewhere. It must be remembered by someone. It must be learned, embodied, spoken, repeated, protected from distortion, and passed on without negligence. To support the one who does that work is, in a very deep sense, to support the Dhamma itself. This is not a small point. It changes the whole way we understand giving. Many people think of generosity only in material terms. They see a robe, a meal, a building, a donation. But in the Buddha's teaching, the value of an act is not measured only by what is transferred from one hand to another. It is measured also by what is being upheld, what is being nourished, what is being enabled to continue in the world. If by supporting one person, the preservation of the teaching is strengthened, then that gift reaches far beyond the visible object. It touches generations. Ananda is especially significant here. He is remembered in the tradition not merely as a disciple among disciples, but as one of extraordinary retention, one who heard much, remembered much, and carried the teachings with remarkable fidelity. His role in preserving the spoken word of the Buddha is immense. So when the Buddha directs the Brahmin's attention to Ananda, he is not making a personal recommendation in the ordinary sense. He is unveiling a principle. If you wish to honor the Dhamma, then honor its living continuity. Support those through whom it remains accessible in this world. There is tenderness in this teaching, but there is also sharp, practical wisdom. The Dhamma is preserved not only by admiration, but by support. A person may love the teaching, praise the teaching, quote the teaching, and still fail to sustain the conditions by which it endures. The one who studies deeply, who memorizes carefully, who teaches honestly, who explains clearly, who practices sincerely, who protects the meaning from confusion and neglect, that person is bearing a burden most people do not even see. To support such a person is not an ordinary act. It is an investment in the lifespan of truth within the human world. And once we understand that, the idea of offering to the Dhamma becomes much richer. It may mean supporting a great teacher whose life is devoted to explaining the path. It may mean helping a diligent practitioner whose realization gives the teaching credibility and power. It may mean caring for a reciter, a scholar, a translator, a keeper of memory, a guardian of scripture, a monk or nun whose fidelity to the training keeps the lineage from fading. It may mean offering the conditions that allow the Dhamma not just to be admired, but to be known, lived and handed on. In that sense, giving to the Dhamma is not giving to an idea. It is giving to the living stream by which the liberating truth continues to flow. And this also helps us understand why different offerings bring different fruits. If one gift supports mere comfort, it bears one kind of result. If another supports virtue, it bears another. If another protects wisdom, memory, and the transmission of the path, then naturally its range and quality differ again. This is why the tradition speaks so carefully about the field of merit. The field matters, the inner state matters. The use to which the offering is put matters. The spiritual quality of the recipient matters. None of this is superstition. It is moral causality viewed with subtle eyes. When the Buddha asked, "Who among the Sangha retains the teachings most fully?" he was directing attention to the recipient's function, not just his rank. This matters greatly. Two people may both wear robes, but they do not necessarily serve the same role in the preservation of the sasana. One may be devoted to meditation, another to teaching, another to discipline, another to preserving discourses through memory, another to guiding lay people, another to silent practice that inspires faith simply through presence. Their strengths differ. The fruits associated with supporting them may differ accordingly. This does not mean one should become calculating in a cold way, as though merit were a business transaction. That would be a misunderstanding. The heart must remain warm, sincere, unselfish, but wisdom must accompany faith. One may love all beings and still recognize distinctions. One may give with tenderness and still understand that causes are not identical. To deny difference where difference exists is not spirituality. It is confusion. The story of the Brahmin protects us from that confusion. He does not ask from greed alone, as though he were trying to game the universe. He asks because he senses that giving can become more intelligent, more aligned, more meaningful. And the Buddha does not discourage that refinement. He educates it. He teaches him that if you want to support the Dhamma, then look for where the Dhamma is actually being carried, remembered, and sustained. Do not stop at sentiment. Find the living place where truth being kept alive. This is a lesson of enormous importance for lay followers. Many people think that to honor the Dhamma means only to bow before books, chant verses, or speak reverently about the teachings. Those things can be wholesome, of course, but the Buddha points towards something more active. If there is a person through whom the teaching is being preserved in integrity, then helping that person is itself an act of reverence toward the Dhamma. If there is a community safeguarding the teaching with discipline and sincerity, then supporting that community is a way of protecting the Dhamma. If there is an elder who has spent a lifetime learning, remembering, practicing, and transmitting, then to care for that elder is not merely kindness to an individual. It is service to the continuity of liberation itself. This is why, in the broader teaching on giving, the object of generosity is never treated as irrelevant. The recipient is not irrelevant. The recipient's virtue is not irrelevant. The recipient's depth of practice is not irrelevant. The recipient's relationship to the Dhamma is not irrelevant. The intention of the giver is powerful, yes, but intention does not erase structure. If a seed is healthy but the field differs, the harvest differs. A seed dropped on stone, a seed dropped on shallow soil, and a seed placed in rich earth do not produce the same result, even if the hand that scattered them was equally sincere each time. So, when one gives to a person of high virtue, the fruit differs from giving to one of little virtue. When one gives to a noble disciple, the fruit differs again. When one gives to a community rather than a single individual, that too has its own significance. And when one gives in support of someone who bears the Dhamma through memory, teaching, preservation, or realization, then that act participates in something wider than private charity. It becomes part of the protection of the path. This is why the old teaching can say, with great seriousness, that if you wish for merit connected with a particular excellence, then support one who is strong in that excellence. If you honor wisdom, support wisdom. If you honor learning, support learning. If you honor meditative depth, support meditative depth. If you honor the spoken transmission of truth, support one who carries it. Your gift then becomes shaped by what it serves. And still, even here, another layer remains. It is not only the recipient that shapes the fruit, it is also the mind of the giver. Two people can place the same offering before the same recipient and still generate very different karmic outcomes. One gives with joy, another with reluctance. One gives freely, another because of pressure. One gives with understanding, another with vagueness. One gives eagerly before, happily during, and with glad recollection afterward. Another gives while inwardly shrinking, doubting, or resenting the loss. Outwardly, the act may look almost identical. Inwardly, it is not the same act at all. So the story of the Brahmin, simple as it is, opens into a much larger vision. It teaches that giving is not one flat category. The fruit of generosity varies according to many conditions. It varies according to who receives, according to what quality in them is being supported, according to whether the gift nourishes virtue or confusion, according to whether it strengthens the living Dhamma or merely circulates resources at the level of ordinary need, and according to the texture of the donor's own heart. To understand this is already to become more careful, more awake, more refined in one's goodness. It means we no longer say, giving is giving, all the same. No, giving is always giving, but it is not all the same. Just as seeds, soils, seasons, and skill all affect a harvest, so too object, intention, wisdom, and inner state affect the fruit of generosity. The law is subtle because life is subtle. And from here, the teaching naturally widens again. Once we have seen, through the Brahmin's question and the Buddha's answer, that even a noble act like giving can differ so profoundly in meaning and result, then we are ready to look more carefully at the major factors that cause one act of generosity to bear one kind of fruit, while another is something highly different. One of those major factors is the recipient, and this is exactly where many people become either too sentimental or too cold. Too sentimental, and they say everyone is the same, so all giving must be exactly equal in meaning. Too cold, and they begin to treat generosity like an investment chart, calculating profit, weight, and return with a dry, anxious mind. But the teaching asks for something more mature than both of these extremes. It asks for a heart that remains soft, yet a mind that remains clear. In the Buddha's teaching, not all fields of giving are equal. This does not mean that one human being has no value while another has value. It does not mean we are allowed to despise, dismiss, or neglect anyone. It means only this: when causes differ, results differ. If we accept cause and effect in farming, medicine, education, and daily work, then we should also be willing to accept it in generosity. Different recipients create different karmic conditions. Different fields receive the seed differently, and therefore the fruit is not identical. This is why the tradition speaks carefully about the field of merit. A field is a simple image, but it is a profound one. If a farmer scatters the same bag of seed in several places, one patch may be dry, another rocky, another shaded, another fertile and well prepared. The seed may be the same, the hand that sows may be the same, the effort may be the same, yet the harvest will not be the same. Why? Because the field matters. So too with giving. When an offering is made to an ordinary person, it bears fruit. Goodness is still goodness. Compassion is still compassion. Help still matters. Hunger relieved is hunger relieved. Pain eased is pain eased. A poor person fed, a sick person cared for, a struggling family supported, a lonely elder remembered. None of this is small. Never think that the Buddha's teaching belittles ordinary giving. It does not. If anything, it protects it by placing it inside a lawful universe where every wholesome act matters. But the teaching also says that giving to a noble being is not the same as giving to an ordinary one. Why? Not because the noble being needs more, and not because holiness flatters the donor's ego. It is because the moral and spiritual quality of the recipient forms part of the karmic condition. A person of virtue, restraint, wisdom, and purity is a more powerful field of merit than a person whose life is clouded by greed, hatred, and delusion. The offering meets a different kind of ground. It enters a different moral atmosphere. The same act, passing through a different relationship, carries a different weight. This can be difficult for modern ears, because we are trained to flatten everything into sameness. We fear that if we acknowledge difference, we are creating arrogance or discrimination. But Buddhism is not speaking here about social rank, wealth, beauty, status, or worldly prestige. It is speaking about qualities of being. It is speaking about sila, samadhi, panna virtue, collectedness, wisdom. It is speaking about the purification of mind. A life more deeply aligned with Dhamma becomes a stronger field of merit, not because of privilege, but because of purity. Think of it quietly. If you place clean water into a clean vessel, it remains clear. If you place it into a dirty vessel, the water is still water, but the condition has changed. In the same way, generosity offered toward a life of integrity and realization enters into a relationship with that integrity and realization. The donor is not buying holiness. The donor is participating in a lawful encounter with goodness of a higher order. And so the texts say that giving to the noble ones, to the Aryas, carries a greater consequence than giving to those still fully caught in worldliness. Again, this must be heard correctly. It is not permission to ignore the ordinary person at your door. It is not instruction to walk past suffering because you are searching for a better return. That would already corrupt the act. If a starving animal is in front of you, if a desperate mother needs help, if a sick neighbor has no medicine, then compassion should not pause to perform spiritual accounting. Mercy must move when mercy is needed. What the teaching offers is discernment, not hardness. It tells us that all beings deserve kindness, but not all acts of giving generate identical karmic force. Reverence for all and discernment about conditions must live together. If one of them is missing, our practice becomes distorted. Reverence without discernment becomes naive. Discernment without reverence becomes spiritually ugly. The same principle applies not only between ordinary persons and noble ones, but also between giving to an individual and giving to a community. In the teaching, offering to the Sangha as a community carries a significance different from offering to one person alone. This too is often misunderstood. People may think the point is merely numerical. Many recipients must mean more merit than one recipient. But the matter is deeper than quantity. When an offering is made to an individual, however worthy that person may be, the act is directed toward one particular stream of life. It has intimacy, specificity, and often personal affection. There is beauty in that. Sometimes a particular monk, nun, teacher, parent, or poor person enters our heart in a direct and unforgettable way, and we feel moved to give. That movement can be sincere and beautiful. But when an offering is made to the community, especially to the noble field represented by the Sangha as a body, the act expands beyond preference. It is less about this person whom I like, and more about honoring the continuity of the Dhamma itself. A communal offering can carry the spirit of relinquishment more broadly because it is not tied so tightly to personality. The donor is supporting not merely one life, but a living institution of practice, transmission, preservation, and collective discipline. The field widens, and with it, the karmic significance may deepen. This is why, in the traditional hierarchy, offering to a community is said to outweigh offering to an individual, even when the individual seems impressive. The point is not to reduce persons into categories. The point is to understand that some acts connect us to a broader and more enduring field of goodness. When one supports a genuine communal field of practice, one is helping sustain conditions under which many may practice, learn, awaken, and pass the teachings forward. The act does not stop with one stomach, one robe, one room, one day. Its relational web extends further, and still, even here, we must be careful. To hear that communal offering is weightier is not to conclude that personal giving is inferior in any crude sense. Life is not that mechanical. There are moments when the right thing is to support one person directly. There are moments when a deeply timely gift to one suffering being may transform an entire life. There are moments when gratitude itself calls us to respond personally. A disciple may owe much to a particular teacher. A child may owe everything to a parent. Patient may owe survival to a compassionate doctor. The Dhamma never asks us to become emotionally barren in the name of principle. Rather, it asks us to see clearly what kind of act we are performing. Is this an offering moved by gratitude, by compassion, by reverence, by support for the preservation of the teaching, by recognition of great virtue, by care for immediate suffering? These distinctions matter, not because we must become obsessed with labels, but because truth matters. To know what we are doing is already a form of wisdom. This also helps explain why the virtue of the recipient affects the fruit. Someone of little virtue can still receive our kindness, and we may still gain merit through the goodness of our own intention. But where the recipient is deeply virtuous, restrained, learned, meditative, or awakened, the act of giving is related to a higher field. In some teachings, even among good recipients, distinctions remain. One person may be strong in study, another in meditation, another in ascetic discipline, another in compassionate service. The donor's aspiration may harmonize with the qualities of the one receiving. This does not mean superstition. It means karmic life is textured. If a person makes an offering to one who preserves and teaches the Dharma, that act may carry a connection to wisdom, learning, and right view. If an offering is made to one who is strong in meditation and inner collectedness, the donor may incline the heart toward calm, depth, and insight. The teaching is not saying that blessings are magically transferred like objects. It is saying that intentional action, directed towards certain qualities, participates in conditions related to those qualities. We become shaped by what we honor. And perhaps this is one of the deepest points here. Giving is never only about the recipient. It is also about the world we are helping affirm. Every offering says, in some quiet way, may this continue. If we support confusion, we strengthen confusion. If we support intoxication, vanity, manipulation, or falsehood, then even if our act feels generous, the field is compromised. But if we support integrity, learning, meditation, compassion, simplicity, and liberation, then our generosity does more than relieve need. It leans toward the good at its source. This is why discernment in giving is not greed in religious clothing. It is not bargaining with karma. It is not spirituality turning into accounting. It is understanding that intention should walk together with wisdom. If a person says, I don't care who receives it, I just want the feeling of giving, there may still be some goodness there, but it remains incomplete. Why? Because wisdom has not yet joined compassion. On the other hand, if someone says, I will only give where I think I gain most merit, the act may become narrow, self-serving, and tense. Compassion has been replaced by ambition. The middle way is more beautiful. Give with an open heart but not a blind one. Respect all beings, but understand that all recipients do not function identically as karmic conditions. Help where suffering is present. Honor where virtue is present. Support where the Dhamma is preserved. Rejoice where the community of practice remains alive. And when possible, let your giving become both tender and wise. This balance protects us from two mistakes. The first is spiritual confusion, where we pretend all contexts are the same, and therefore miss the subtle lawfulness of karma. The second is spiritual vanity, where we rank people harshly and forget that every being, however lost, is still wandering in suffering and worthy of compassion. The Buddha's teaching avoids both errors. It allows for hierarchy of fields without hierarchy of human contempt. That distinction matters immensely. To say that a noble disciple is a greater field of merit than an ordinary person is not to say the ordinary person is beneath our care. To say that a communal offering may outweigh an individual one is not to say that personal acts of kindness are small. It is simply to say that the universe of moral action has structure. Weight exists. Conditions differ. Consequences unfold accordingly. Once we understand this, generosity becomes more intelligent and more peaceful. We no longer give merely because emotion rises in the moment, nor do we freeze in endless calculation. We begin to ask with humility, what is truly being supported here? What qualities am I placing my resources behind? What field am I sowing into? These are not cold questions. They are loving questions asked by a mind that respects cause and effect. And yet, recipient is only one side of the matter. The other side is the inner state of the donor at the moment of giving. Two halves make the whole event, and the tradition insists on both. Because a teaching that praised only the field and ignored the sower would leave half of the truth about karma unexamined. This point is easy to miss because the eyes naturally go to the object. We see the amount, the package, the public result, the visible relief it brings. We see food placed in a bowl, money transferred into a hand, robes offered, medicine delivered, a hall built, a book printed, a meal arranged. Because the gift can be seen, we assume the real story is outside. But in the Buddha's teaching, the unseen part is never secondary. The hand may open outward, but the heart is also moving inward. And what happens there matters tremendously. Two people may give the same amount to the same person on the same day, and yet the moral quality of those two actions may not be the same at all. Outwardly, they look identical. Inwardly, they are worlds apart. One gives because the heart rises gladly. One gives because someone is watching. One gives from quiet gratitude. One gives from fear of criticism. One gives because compassion appeared before calculation had time to harden the heart. Another gives because refusing would feel awkward, embarrassing, or socially costly. The object may be equal, but the mind is not equal. And where the mind differs, the karma differs. This is why Buddhist psychology treats intention and mental tone as part of the deed itself, not as decorative feelings floating around the deed. The mind is not packaging. The mind is substance. A gift is not only what leaves the hand, it is also the quality of consciousness that releases it. If the release is warm, willing, and clear, that warmth is part of the act. If the release is grudging, irritated, confused, or pressured, those qualities are also part of the act. The universe does not record only the thing given, it records the heart that gave it. That can sound severe at first, but it is actually very merciful. It means the Dhamma does not reduce generosity to wealth. It does not say that only the rich can give greatly. It does not say that spiritual value is measured by market value. A modest gift offered with joy, respect, and sincerity may carry a beauty that a larger gift cannot carry when it is given with resentment or vanity. This does not make the material effect unimportant. If a large offering feeds many, the benefit is real. But the Buddha asks us to look deeper than cost. He asks us to see that the interior posture of the giver shapes the moral fragrance of the whole action. Think of how different the heart can feel in ordinary life. Sometimes we help someone and feel light even before the giving is complete. There is no bargaining inside, no sense of being dragged. The heart knows this is right. In that moment, generosity is not a burden. It is almost a relief, as though something in us has been waiting for the chance to open. At other times, we give while inwardly tightening. The smile is present, but the chest is closed. The hand extends, but the mind pulls back. We part with the object, yet we cling through irritation. We may even continue replaying the loss after the gift is gone. In one case, giving loosens bondage. In the other, giving can become another scene of bondage. This is why the tradition pays close attention to whether an act is supported by one's own heart or carried out under pressure. There is a difference between giving because wisdom and kindness move us, and giving because we are cornered by suggestion, custom, shame, or force. A person may be nudged by others in a wholesome direction, and that can still become good if the heart joins willingly. But if the mind remains resistant, if one gives only to stop the pleading, silence the room, protect one's image, or avoid looking stingy, then the action is morally thinner. Something has been offered, yes. Some goodness is there, yes. But the mind did not fully stand behind the deed. This is what is meant when teachers distinguish between giving with inner support and giving with a hesitant or externally pushed mind. The issue is not whether another person mentioned the opportunity. The issue is whether, at the moment of doing, the heart participates. Did the mind consent with clarity? Did it lean in, or was it half absent, half unwilling, dragged along by social momentum? The Buddha's analysis is subtle enough to notice these shades. There is spontaneous giving, and there is reluctant giving. Spontaneous giving does not necessarily mean impulsive or thoughtless. It means the heart moves freely when goodness is understood. There is no inner warfare required to make the hand open. The person may still reflect carefully, may still choose the right time, the right recipient, the right form. But once seen clearly, the act comes naturally. Reluctant giving is different. The mind stalls, it negotiates. It asks how little it can do while still appearing decent. It gives in fragments, with emotional breaks still engaged. Even when the act is completed, it is completed with a residue of contraction. There is warm-hearted giving, and there is indifferent giving. Warm-hearted giving carries human presence. It sees the recipient not as an interruption but as a life. It carries some tenderness, some reverence, some genuine wish that this offering be of use. Indifferent giving may still be efficient, even useful, but inwardly it is cold. It is done as one clears a task. The act lacks insult perhaps, but it also lacks living care. In Buddhist terms, that difference matters because consciousness is being trained in every repetition. The heart becomes what it practices. If we practice giving with warmth, warmth becomes easier. If we practice giving while emotionally absent, absence hardens. There is eager giving, and there is half-hearted giving. Eager giving does not mean dramatic display. It does not mean excitement for applause. It means the mind is bright in wholesome action. It is glad to participate in good. There is freshness there, a feeling that one is fortunate to be able to give at all. Half-hearted giving does not always look ugly from the outside. It may even look very proper. But inwardly it is dull, split, withholding. One part of the mind goes through the motion. Another part remains unconvinced. The act lands, but not with full life. The Buddha's teaching is realistic here. He is not demanding that every act of generosity emerge from perfect purity. Human minds are mixed. We may begin with pressure and end with gladness. We may begin with hesitation and grow into understanding. We may do a good act with only partial clarity, and still that goodness is not lost. But because karma is precise, the texture of mind still matters. A deed performed with a doubtful, dragging mind bears fruit differently from a deed performed with confidence, care, and wise reflection. This is why traditional teachings speak of the mind before the act, the mind during the act, and the mind after the act. Before giving, there can be resistance or readiness. During giving, there can be joy or stinginess. After giving, there can be glad recollection or regret. These are not minor footnotes. They are part of the karmic architecture of generosity. If a person gives and then spends days resenting the loss, that resentment continues shaping the action's quality. If a person gives and later recollects it with quiet gladness, not with pride, but with appreciation for goodness, that wholesome afterglow nourishes the seed. So when we say that the donor's mental state changes not only the quality, but even the timing of karmic fruit, we are saying something profound. A reluctant and unsupported act can still lead to benefit, but the benefit may come weakly, unevenly, or late. The mind that gave was hesitant, and that hesitation leaves its print. A wholehearted act, by contrast, carries fewer internal obstructions. It is more complete. It has more life in it. It moves through consciousness with greater coherence, and the results are correspondingly stronger, smoother, and more graceful when conditions ripen. This should not be heard as superstition. It is psychologically intelligible, even at the ordinary level. When a person repeatedly acts with willingness, reflection, and sincerity, that person is not merely storing future merit in some distant metaphysical account. They are shaping character now. They become more open, more trusting of goodness, less cramped by fear, less ruled by possessiveness. Such a mind naturally moves through the world with a different energy. Opportunities are met differently. Relationships are affected differently. Decisions are made differently. Even before unseen karmic fruit is discussed, visible life already begins to change. And the opposite is also true. If a person gives only when pushed, only when ashamed, only when their reputation is at stake, then the act may still produce some good result. But the deeper habit being reinforced is not generosity so much as compliance mixed with self-protection. The hand learns to release under pressure, but the heart has not yet learned freedom. This is why two donors who seem equal outwardly may be cultivating very different futures inwardly. There is another gentle but important truth here. To examine the mind is not the same as becoming self-conscious and artificial. Some people, after hearing teachings like this, become anxious. They think, then unless my mind is perfect, I should not give. That is not the point. If we wait for flawless motives, many good acts will never happen. The point is not perfection before action. The point is increasing honesty and wisdom within action. We give as best we can, and we also observe. Was there joy? Was there vanity? Was there tenderness? Was there hesitation? Seeing clearly is already part of purification. Over time, this honesty refines generosity. We begin to notice when we are giving to be seen. We begin to notice when we are irritated by the very person we are helping. We begin to notice when our mind is bargaining for praise, security, or emotional superiority. And instead of being discouraged, we become educated. We understand that the training is not only to transfer resources, but to transform relationship to resources. Not only to relieve another's need, but to expose the hidden knots in oneself. In that way, giving becomes a mirror. It shows us where greed still lives, where fear still trembles, where identity still clings. And then, slowly, a beautiful kind of giving becomes possible. One gives not as a performance, not as a tax paid to social expectation, not as a transaction for future status, but as something almost obvious. A burning house is not the place for hoarding. A mortal body is not the place for arrogance over possessions. This life moves quickly. What can be turned into goodness should be turned into goodness. When that understanding deepens, the mind does not feel robbed by generosity. It feels relieved by it. It knows that what is shared wisely is not lost in the deepest sense. This is why the value of a gift cannot be measured by price alone. Cost matters in one way, but sincerity matters in another. The object matters, but the inner posture matters too. A rich person may give a large amount as one throws something into a pit, with no reverence, no warmth, no living participation. A poor person may offer a simple thing with such clean gladness that the act shines. Again, this is not romance. It is moral psychology. The deed is made of matter and mind together. Once this is understood, we are ready to look even more closely at generosity, because not all giving bears the same signature. There are recognizable styles of giving that reveal how a person values both themselves and others. And with the role of the donor's mind now made clear, we can begin to see why the tradition speaks of 3 distinct ways a person gives. And this is where the teaching becomes uncomfortably honest, because it asks us not only whether we give, but how we give. Outwardly, 2 offerings can look almost identical. 2 people may place food in a bowl, money in a hand, medicine on a table, cloth on a shoulder. To the casual eye, both have done a good deed. But the Dhamma is never satisfied with appearances alone. It looks through the hand and into the heart. It asks, when you gave, what place did the other person occupy in your mind? What place did you occupy? Was there reverence? Was there equality? Was there hidden contempt? That is why the tradition speaks of 3 kinds of giving: master giving, friend giving, and slave giving. These 3 names are vivid on purpose. They are meant to wake us up. They do not describe social rank in the worldly sense. They reveal the inner quality of the donor's attitude. They show whether generosity is ennobled by dignity, balanced by fairness, or diminished by ego. And if we listen carefully, they become a mirror. Not a mirror for judging others, but a mirror for seeing ourselves more clearly. Master giving is the highest of the 3. It means giving away something better than what one keeps and uses for oneself. It means that when the moment of offering comes, one does not send out leftovers while protecting the finest portion. One does not say, this good thing is for me, that lesser thing is for others. Instead, one gives with honor. One gives with the feeling that the recipient is worthy of care, worthy of beauty, worthy of comfort, worthy of the best one can sincerely offer. There is something very pure in this. It does not always mean extravagance. It does not mean one must impoverish oneself or perform some dramatic display. It means that in one's heart there is no cheapening of the other person. If I choose a gift, a meal, a robe, a seat, a place, and I quietly make sure the better portion goes to the one receiving, then something beautiful is being trained in me. I am training the mind to loosen its reflex of self-preference. I am teaching the heart not to revolve around me first in every small decision. Think of a simple home. Guests arrive. The family has fruit, tea, perhaps only enough of one especially good dish for a few people. Without fanfare, the host places the best in front of the guest and keeps the ordinary portion for themselves. Nothing is announced. No speech is made. But inwardly, a great lesson has already been enacted. The host has said, not in words but in action, your presence matters, your dignity matters. I do not protect my comfort by lowering yours. That is close to the spirit of master giving. Or imagine someone preparing an offering for a monastic, a teacher, a parent, an elder, a sick person, a traveler, or anyone in need. If they inspect what they have and choose the cleaner cloth, the fresher food, the stronger medicine, the more comfortable blanket, while taking the older one for themselves, then the object given carries respect inside it. The visible gift is one thing. The invisible bow of the heart is another. Master giving contains both. This is why it is morally revealing. It tells us that true generosity is not merely disposal. It is not a technique for removing excess from our life. It is not, take what I do not need. Sometimes that may still help someone, and we should not deny the practical good in that. But the Dhamma asks us to notice whether giving has become a polished form of self-protection. Master giving cuts through that. It asks, can you truly honor another being, not just by words, but by what you are willing to part with? Then there is friend giving. Friend giving means giving to others at the same level as what one uses for oneself. Not better, not worse, but equal. I eat this quality of food and I offer that same quality. I wear this kind of cloth and I give that same kind of cloth. I rest on this level of comfort and I provide that same level of comfort for another. Here the attitude is one of balance. The donor does not place themselves above the recipient, nor do they raise the recipient above themselves. There is a spirit of companionship, mutual regard, and fairness. This too is wholesome. In many situations, it is already a noble standard, because what does it mean really to give as a friend? It means I do not secretly think of your hunger as cheaper than mine, your body as less worthy than mine, your need as less urgent than mine. It means I recognize a shared human condition. We are both vulnerable. We both feel heat and cold, comfort and discomfort, joy and pain. So I do not build generosity on inequality, I build it on recognition. There is a quiet beauty in friend giving because it reflects moral symmetry. The same measure I use for myself, I use for you. If I would not eat spoiled food, I do not hand spoiled food to another. If I would not sleep on something filthy, I do not donate filth and call myself generous. If I would not wear something torn beyond use, I do not push that onto someone else and then congratulate myself for charity. Friend giving protects decency. It says, I see your life as having weight equal to my own. For many people, this is a very important step in spiritual maturity. Because before the heart becomes capable of gladly giving the better share, it may first need to become honest enough to stop giving the worse share. It may first need to learn equality. In that sense, friend giving is not small. It is a real purification of attitude. It uproots a certain arrogance. It refuses to feed on the illusion that another person should be grateful for whatever diminished thing we toss their way. And then there is slave giving, the lowest of the three. Slave giving means giving away what is worse than what one personally uses. One keeps the better things close and sends the inferior things outward. One eats well but gives stale food. One dresses neatly but donates what is nearly useless. One preserves comfort for oneself while exporting inconvenience, embarrassment, or degradation to someone else. Outwardly, this still looks like giving. Inwardly, however, it exposes a painful truth. The hand extends, but the ego does not bow. This is why the teaching uses such a sharp phrase. Slave giving reveals that the recipient has been unconsciously placed beneath the donor's sense of self. The person receiving is treated not as a field of merit, not as a fellow being, not as someone worthy of care, but almost as a dumping ground for what the donor no longer respects. Again, the practical object may still be of some use. A worn item may still help someone in hardship. The tradition is not asking us to become theatrical or unrealistic, but it is asking us to tell the truth about our intention. Did we give because we cared? Or did we give because we wanted to clear space, lighten our guilt, polish our image, or enjoy the pleasant identity of being generous, without surrendering any real preference? This is where the teaching becomes piercing, because slave giving is not only about poor quality objects. It can also appear in tone of voice, body language, timing, and emotional atmosphere. A person may give a perfectly usable gift, but do so in a way that humiliates the recipient. They may make the other wait, beg, feel small, feel indebted, feel exposed. They may remind the recipient of their lower position with every glance. In that case, even if the object itself is decent, the spirit of the act has been degraded. The gift arrives carrying superiority. It says, "Here, take this, but remember who is above and who is below." And that is why this teaching matters so much. It pulls giving out of the realm of arithmetic and places it in the realm of character. It asks us to see that every offering contains a subtle message. Sometimes the object says one thing while the heart says another. A large gift can contain disdain. A modest gift can contain reverence. A costly donation can be slave-giving in spirit if it is given with vanity and condescension. A simple meal can approach master giving in spirit if what is best available is gladly offered with honor. So these three categories are not merely labels for things. They are diagnoses of relationship. Master giving says, "I can lower self-clinging and raise the other with joy." Friend giving says, "I meet you on equal ground." Slave giving says, "I protect my higher place and give downward from it." One purifies fairness. One exposes hidden ego. If we are sincere, all three may be found in our own life. Not everyone is always one type. In one situation, we may give beautifully. In another, we may become calculating. With one person, we are warm and respectful. With another, we become careless. With someone we admire, we offer our best. With someone we overlook, we offer what remains. This is exactly why the teaching is useful. It does not exist to flatter us or shame us. It exists to refine us. It teaches us to detect the unseen attitudes mixed into our goodness. When we hear master giving, we should not rush to perform it dramatically for praise. That would only feed another form of self-centeredness. The point is quieter than that. It is to cultivate nobility in the heart, to learn to give in a way that dignifies the receiver and liberates the giver, to recognize that every act of real generosity is also an act of training. We are training perception. We are training intention. We are training ourselves to see that what we cling to so tightly is passing anyway, and what we release wisely becomes part of the beauty of the path. And when we hear slave giving, we should not simply condemn ourselves and stop giving altogether. That too would miss the point. Better to be honest, to notice, to adjust and to grow. If today my generosity is mixed, then let me know it is mixed. If today I still choose the better thing for myself, then let me at least stop pretending that this is pure sacrifice. From honesty comes humility. From humility comes correction. From correction comes a finer kind of merit. In this way, the teaching is compassionate, even when it sounds severe. It shows us that giving is never only about transfer of property. It is a revelation of how we hold self and other in the mind. It reveals whether we are attached to status, addicted to self-advantage, or capable of reverence. It shows whether generosity is polishing the ego or softening it. It exposes whether we see other beings as inconvenient mouths, useful witnesses, equal companions, or sacred opportunities to practice letting go. And if we understand even this much, we begin to see why the wise do not speak lightly about almsgiving, offering, support, donation, and service. These are not merely social actions, they are spiritual disclosures. Through them, our inner world steps briefly into visible form. The gift leaves the hand, but before it does, it passes through motive, view, habit, memory, fear, tenderness, pride, and understanding. That is why one person's offering cleanses the heart deeply, while another person's offering leaves the old self almost untouched. So after recognizing these three kinds of giving, we are ready for an even subtler question. If the quality of giving is shaped not only by what is given and to whom, but also by the hidden state of the mind, then we must look more closely at the movement of consciousness itself. What happens in the heart before the act begins, while the act is being done, and after it is completed, because the Dhamma does not stop at the object in the hand. It continues into the intention that formed it, the awareness that accompanied it, and the echo it leaves behind. And this is where the teaching becomes even more intimate, because now we are no longer only looking at the gift, or the recipient, or the outer form of generosity. We are looking at the mind in three moments: before the act, during the act, and after the act. In the teachings, this is sometimes understood as a threefold reflection, a careful attending to the movement of the heart across the whole life of a wholesome deed, not just when the hand opens, but before the hand opens, while it is opening, and long after the object has been released. This matters more than most people realize. Many think merit is made at the moment something is given, as though the whole moral weight of the act exists only in that visible second. But the Buddha's teaching is subtler than that. A deed is not merely an event. It is a process of consciousness. A wholesome action begins before the body moves. It is shaped while the action is occurring, and it continues afterward in the way the mind remembers, approves, regrets, rejoices, or darkens around what has been done. So when speaking about giving, the wise do not ask only, "What did you give?" They also ask, "What was the state of your mind before giving? What was the state of your mind while giving? And what remained in the heart after giving?" Because these three phases are not decorative details. They are conditions. They nourish the seed of karma, or they weaken it. They color the fruit that will ripen later. Before doing a good deed, one should reflect. While doing it, one should remain present and clear. After doing it, one should know how to protect the mind from decline and keep it bright. This is the inner craftsmanship of merit. Without it, people may still do good, but the heart remains rough, confused, divided, and hungry. With it, the same outward act becomes much more complete. It becomes cleaner, deeper, and more transformative. But here we have to be very careful, because reflection is not the same as hesitation. Many people confuse the two. They imagine that to pause before acting is always a sign of wisdom. Not necessarily. Sometimes a pause is wise. Sometimes a pause is only fear wearing the mask of thoughtfulness. Hesitation asks, "Should I do this at all? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe later. Maybe someone else will do it. Maybe I should keep more for myself. Maybe this is too much. Maybe this person does not deserve it. Maybe I will regret it." That kind of mind is unstable. It leans forward and backward. It is not standing on understanding, it's standing on uncertainty. In Buddhist language, this is related to a mentality that is assisted, pushed, or supported from outside itself, rather than arising with strong inner clarity. The good act may still happen, but it happens with drag. It happens as though the mind must be pulled. A person may give because someone urged them to, or because they felt embarrassed not to, or because everyone around them was doing it, or because they knew giving was good, but their own heart was not yet ready and had to be coaxed along. This is still not useless. It still has moral value. It is still better than refusing to do good. The Dhamma is compassionate enough to acknowledge that imperfect goodness is still goodness. If a person gives with a wavering mind, there is still a wholesome result. The seed is still planted. But the result is not equal to the result of giving done with brightness, confidence, and understanding. Why? Because the cause was not equally full. A hesitant mind produces a more hesitant fruit. The goodness reaches its destination, but it may arrive late, thin, or incomplete. The traditional explanation is powerful. When good is done with a doubtful, assisted mentality, the result can still be pleasant, but it tends to ripen slowly, and often only after tension, delay, or constriction. It is as though the blessing is there, but it does not flow freely. It comes after the person has already tightened, worried, shrunk back, or almost lost heart. This is a profound psychological truth. We can even see shadows of it in this very life. Someone gives reluctantly and spends the rest of the day thinking, "Did I give too much? Was that necessary? What if I need it later? The act was good." Yes, the mind spoiling its own the hand released the gift, but the heart kept clutching it. In such a case, merit is not absent. Yet the mind has not fully learned freedom. It has touched goodness but not rested in it. Wise reflection is completely different. Wise reflection does not ask, "Should I do good or not?" It asks, "How can I do this in the most skillful way?" That is a different world. The first question belongs to indecision. The second belongs to understanding. The first is entangled in self-protection. The second is already moving in the direction of wisdom. When a person reflects wisely before giving, they may consider many things. They may ask, "What is the most suitable way to help? What can I offer that truly relieves suffering? What can I give without harming other responsibilities? What kind of giving will be most beneficial here? What state of mind should I establish before I act?" None of this is hesitation. This is discernment. This is not the mind trying to escape goodness. It is the mind trying to purify goodness. This kind of reflection is praised because it is joined with understanding. It has intelligence in it. It is not the confusion of someone standing at a crossroads, unable to move. It is the care of someone who already knows the direction and wishes to walk it well. In the language of the Abhidhamma, wholesome states can arise accompanied by wisdom or separated from wisdom. When giving is guided by clear comprehension, by thoughtful consideration, by right view, then the deed is brighter. It carries more fullness because the mind is not merely being nice. It is seeing. And what does it see? It sees impermanence. It sees that possession is fragile. It sees that clinging is painful. It sees that wealth cannot be secured forever, that the body itself is uncertain, that opportunities to do good are passing conditions, not permanent fixtures. It sees that another person's hunger is real. It sees that generosity is not loss in the Dharma sense, but release. So when such a person reflects, their reflection is not cold calculation. It is warm with insight. It is guided by the wish to let goodness mature in the most wholesome form. Then comes the second phase. While doing the good deed, this too is crucial. It is possible to begin well and then spoil the act in the middle. A person may decide with joy, but while giving they become irritated, distracted, proud, ashamed, or inwardly superior. Or they may give while mentally performing for others, wanting recognition more than purification. Outwardly the deed remains generous. Inwardly it has become mixed. So the teaching invites us to stay awake during the act itself. While giving, one should be composed, respectful, and clear. The mind should not be scattered. It should not be angry. It should not be secretly bargaining. There should be a simple sincerity in the moment. If the act is small, let it be small and clean. If the act is great, let it be great and humble. This middle moment is where intention becomes embodied. It is where the unseen quality of the mind passes through speech, posture, gaze, touch, and tone. Often the receiver feels this immediately. A person can be fed and still feel humiliated. Another can be given very little and yet feel deeply honored. The difference is not only in the object, it is in the mind present during the giving. And then there is the third phase, after the deed is done. This may be the most neglected of all. Many people think once something has been offered, the matter is finished. But the mind continues shaping the karmic texture of the act by the way it holds the memory afterward. If after giving a person regrets it, boasts about it, resents the recipient, or keeps revisiting the act in a spirit of self-congratulation, the mind clouds over. It is like placing soot on a clean lamp. But if after doing good a person recollects the act with quiet gladness, that is itself another wholesome condition. Not vanity, not self-worship, but serene rejoicing, a gentle inner acknowledgement it was good to do that. May that goodness support what is beautiful in this life and beyond. May all beings be well. This kind of recollection protects the mind. It lets the merit continue as nourishment. The action has ended, but the heart remains bright. This is why the teaching on the 3 reflections is so practical and so deep. Before the act, examine and guide the intention. During the act, remain present and wholesome. After the act, guard against regret, pride, and mental corruption, and instead cultivate gladness and clarity. In this way, one act of generosity is no longer a single brief event. It becomes a field of training. It educates desire. It softens identity. It reshapes habit. It teaches the mind how to move from clutching to releasing, from confusion to understanding. And from here we can begin to see one of the Buddha's most subtle principles. Mental qualities do not disappear when the moment passes. They mature. They ripen according to their own nature. If one repeatedly does good with reluctance, one plants the pattern of reluctance. If one repeatedly does good with fear, one plants the pattern of fear. If one repeatedly does good with bright discernment, spontaneous gladness, and clear reflection, one plants those qualities too. In time, they return not only as outer results, but as modes of being. A mind that gives with joy becomes more capable of joy. A mind that gives with wisdom becomes more capable of wisdom. A mind that gives after careful reflection becomes more skillful in future choices. This is why the tradition says, do wholesome deeds with the best mind possible. Not because the Buddha asks for perfection before action, but because the mind used in action is already the blueprint of future experience. So, when we hear that one should reflect before doing merit, remain clear while doing it, and rejoice wisely afterward, this is not ritual language. It is a map of inner causality. It shows us how consciousness leaves traces in itself. It shows us that the quality of future happiness is not determined only by the amount given, but by the state of heart that gave it. And once we understand that, we are ready to look even more closely at how different mental conditions become different kinds of future fruit. How delight, spontaneity, encouragement, hesitation, and discernment each leave their own distinct imprint on the road ahead. And this is where the teaching becomes both sobering and beautiful. A deed is never only the outer deed. A gift is never only the object placed into someone's hand. What truly travels forward is the mind that moved with the act. The hand may open in one moment, but the heart that opened, half opened, or resisted opening at all, that is what shapes the deeper result. In other words, as the mind gives, so the fruit ripens. This is a law worth hearing slowly, because most people miss it. They think karma is a crude accounting system. Give this much, receive that much, donate here, be rewarded there. But the Buddha's teaching is far more refined than that. It does not look only at what was done. It looks at how it was done, why it was done, what kind of inner weather accompanied it, and what qualities of consciousness were present while the act was unfolding. The future fruit is not stamped only by the size of the offering. It is shaped by the texture of the mind. That is why two people may give the same amount to the same person on the same day, and yet the karmic outcome is not identical. Outwardly, the act looks the same. Inwardly, it may be worlds apart. One gives with delight, clarity, and reverence. Another gives with reluctance, social pressure, and a faint irritation. One gives because wisdom has already whispered, "This is the right thing, do it well." Another gives because the moment has cornered them, and they do not want to appear stingy. The bowl receives the same object. But karma does not read only the object. Karma reads the mind. So when the elders say that wholesome action done with a certain mind will ripen in a way that resembles that mind, they are not speaking poetically. They are describing an inner symmetry. A cramped mind tends to leave cramped traces. A bright mind leaves bright traces. A hesitant mind leaves a mark of hesitation. A generous and joyful mind leaves a mark of ease and abundance. It is as though consciousness stamps its own signature on every deed, and later, when conditions are right, that signature becomes visible as experience. This is especially important in giving, because giving is not only about transferring ownership, it is a revelation. It reveals how tightly the self is holding, how much fear is hidden under the surface, how much trust is available, how much wisdom is present, how much delight can arise when one lets go. A person may part with wealth, yet still cling inwardly. Another may give a small thing, but give it with such freedom that the act becomes inwardly vast. The karmic force does not depend only on material weight. It depends on mental quality. So let us look carefully at one of the most easily misunderstood points. A person may give with doubt, with wavering, with an inward pause that says, "Should I do this? Is this really necessary? What if I regret it later? What if I need this for myself?" If such a person still goes ahead and performs a wholesome act, that act is not lost. It still bears good fruit. The Buddha's teaching is not cruel, and karma is not all or nothing. Good done with an imperfect mind is still good. Merit made through uncertainty is still merit. Wholesome intention, even mixed with weakness, does not become meaningless. But the fruit often carries the shape of that weakness. This is the subtle point. When giving is done with hesitation, the future result may still come, but not with fullness, not with immediacy, not with the graceful flow that belongs to a brighter mind. It may arrive later. It may arrive thinner. It may come only after one has gone through moments of narrowing anxiety or pressure. It is as though the seed was planted, but planted into poor soil with too little water, and under an uncertain sky. The seed is alive, yes. The potential is real, yes. But the conditions wrapped around it were not complete. So the old teachers sometimes say, the fruit of hesitant merit can still mature, but it often comes after much contraction. One suffers the shrinking first, then the relief comes. One goes through the dry stretch, and only near the end does the goodness finally show itself. Not because karma is punishing the giver, but because the mind that gave already carried that pattern of holding back, of tightening, of not flowing freely. The future ripening echoes that original shape. We know this even in ordinary life. If someone helps us while inwardly resenting it, we can feel the difference. The act is useful, but the energy is strained. If another person helps with warmth, readiness, and gladness, we feel nourished by more than the act itself. Something in us relaxes. Something in the world seems kinder. Why should karma be any less sensitive than the human heart? It records not only behavior, but atmosphere. Now compare that with giving done in another way. Imagine a mind that is willing before being pushed, glad before being praised, thoughtful before acting, and clear about why the act matters. Such a person does not merely throw something away. They understand value. They reflect, what is the best way to do this? What will truly help? What can I offer that is timely, appropriate, and beneficial? Then, when they give with a clean inward movement. Not restless, not calculating, not gloomy, not inflated, just lucid and warm. that kind of giving carries very different karmic conditions. When wholesome action is done with intelligent reflection, joy, and readiness, the future fruit ripens with qualities that resemble those very states. Since the act was bright, the result tends toward brightness. Since the act was graceful, the result tends toward grace. Since the act was accompanied by understanding, the result supports understanding. The tradition explains this in many ways, but the essence is simple. The mind conditions the flavor of its own future. A person who repeatedly gives with thoughtful wisdom is not only creating the possibility of material well-being, they are cultivating inner architecture. Beauty can come from that. Intelligence can come from that. Good timing can come from that. Ease in one's undertakings can come from that. Favorable circumstances, supportive encounters, a natural attractiveness of presence, a kind of effortless opening in life. These too can be connected to the way wholesome actions were performed. This may sound surprising until we remember that karma is not merely about external reward. It is also about the formation of tendencies, capacities, and modes of experience. If one gives with a mind that is open, trusting, and discerning, then one is repeatedly strengthening openness, trust, and discernment. Such a mind becomes a suitable ground for fortunate unfolding. It meets the world differently. It sees opportunities more clearly. It receives support more naturally. It responds to changing conditions with less panic and more intelligence. In that sense, favorable karma is not magic descending from the sky. It is the natural blossoming of causes laid down in consciousness. This is why joy matters. This is why willingness matters. This is why thoughtful reflection matters. Not because one must perform holiness in some dramatic way, but because these qualities nourish the seed. Think of a plant. A seed can germinate in rough conditions. It can break through hard ground. It can survive with little water. It can remain alive in partial shade. And if that is all that is available, life still tries to continue. The plant may grow, yes, but slowly. It may become thin, bent, pale, or fragile. Its leaves may emerge, but without richness. Its fruit may appear but small and inconsistent. No one says the seed failed completely. It did what it could under the conditions it was given. But now imagine the same seed under better care. The soil is loosened, water comes regularly, light reaches it in the right measure, there is nourishment in the earth, the roots have room, the air circulates, the season is kind, someone removes the weeds around it, someone protects it from being trampled. Then what happens? The hidden possibility inside the seed begins to express itself fully. It does not merely survive. It flourishes, its color deepens, its branches strengthen, flowers come in season, fruit matures well. What was always latent now becomes visible, not because a different seed was used, but because the conditions were complete. Karmic seeds are much the same. A wholesome deed done with a poor mental environment can still produce something good. But a wholesome deed done with a rich mental environment produces a more complete and beautiful ripening. If the act is accompanied by joy, that joy becomes part of the seedbed. If it is accompanied by self-initiative, that spontaneous willingness becomes part of the seedbed. If it is accompanied by wise consideration, that clarity becomes part of the seedbed. If, before giving, during giving, and after giving, the mind is settled and bright, then the karma is being watered from all sides. This is why the tradition places such emphasis on the quality of consciousness before, during, and after the act. Before the deed, one reflects wisely. During the deed, one remains clear and willing. After the deed, one recollects it with gladness rather than regret. This is not ceremonial decoration. It is cultivation. It is like caring for the seed at every stage, rather than only dropping it into the ground and walking away. And when all these qualities are present together, the future effect can be remarkably complete. A person may be reborn with not only wealth, but with the intelligence to use it well. Not only opportunity, but also the timing to meet opportunity at the right moment. Not only pleasant conditions, but the inward ease to benefit from them. Not only outer attractiveness, but a brightness of manner that draws good things near. Such results are not random. They mirror the harmony of the causes that produced them. If one gave with enthusiasm, there is a tendency toward cheerfulness in the fruit. If one gave voluntarily, without needing to be dragged into goodness, there is a tendency toward smoothness and readiness in the fruit. If one gave with understanding, there is a tendency toward wisdom and skill in the fruit. The deed flowers according to the mind that nourished it. So when the teachers say, "Do good with the best mind you can," they are not burdening us with idealism. They are inviting us into realism. If the same outer act can be done with tension or with freedom, why not do it with freedom? If the same gift can be offered with confusion or with understanding, why not offer it with understanding? If the same charity can be done with gloom or with gladness, why not let the heart brighten first? The point is not to delay goodness until one feels perfect. The point is to refine the mind as much as one honestly can, so that the deed becomes fuller in both present beauty and future power. Even a small adjustment matters. A person may begin hesitant, then pause and recollect. This is beneficial. This helps loosen greed. This supports life. This is worth doing. At once, the mind changes. Or a person may feel pressured at first, then breathe and consciously choose. Let me do this willingly. Let me not make goodness feel like defeat. Again, the mind changes, or one may give impulsively, then afterward wisely rejoice rather than second-guess the act. That too enriches the karma. The teaching is practical. It does not ask for a superhuman heart. It asks us to care about the quality of the heart we are already using. And perhaps this is the deepest tenderness in the whole matter. The Buddha's path does not reduce us to our possessions, our status, or the visible size of our offerings. It turns us back toward the living center of the act. It says, look closely at the mind, protect the mind, educate the mind, brighten the mind, because the mind is not only the doer of karma, it is also the field in which karma will one day ripen. Once we begin to understand this, generosity stops being a transaction and becomes a training in being. The gift outside becomes inseparable from the formation inside. We are no longer merely asking, how much did I give? We begin asking, with what heart did I give? Was there joy? Was there freedom? Was there clarity? Was there care? These questions do not weaken generosity. They ennoble it. They complete it. And from here, one final understanding begins to emerge very naturally. If hesitant giving, pressured giving, joyful giving, and wise giving all leave different kinds of traces, then there must be a fuller constellation of mental qualities that make generosity truly radiant in the present and deeply potent in the future. There must be a complete way of giving in which the heart is bright, the intention is pure, the understanding is clear, and the act itself becomes beautiful from beginning to end. That is where the teaching now leads us next. So when the teaching gathers itself to this final point, what appears is something both simple and profound. The act of giving reaches its most beautiful form when three inner qualities are present together: gladness, initiative, and careful discernment. In other words, the heart is happy to give. The giving arises from oneself rather than from pressure, and the mind knows how to consider well. These are not decorative additions. They are not optional refinements for advanced practitioners. They are the very conditions that reveal what kind of consciousness is at work in the moment of giving. A person may give much, and yet inside there is heaviness. Another may give only a little, but there is warmth, willingness, and clarity, and that little gift becomes luminous. This is why the Buddha's teaching does not stop at the hand. It goes straight into the mind behind the hand. If the outer gift is the body of generosity, then the inner state is its life. Without that life, even a large offering can remain thin. With that life, even a modest offering can become full of blessing. Gladness matters because the mind stamps itself onto every action. If one gives with reluctance, the act is done, but the mind has not blossomed. If one gives with inner brightness, then the giving already becomes a reward in the present moment. There is a lightness that appears immediately. The chest is not tight. The face softens. One does not feel diminished by what has been shared. One feels relieved, opened, and strangely enlarged. This is one of the most beautiful secrets of generosity. When giving is done well, it does not make the giver smaller, it makes the giver more spacious. And initiative matters because a self-moved heart is stronger than a pushed one. If we give only because someone is watching, or because custom forces us, or because we are embarrassed not to, then merit may still be there, but it is mixed. The mind has not fully stood up in its own goodness. But when the wish to give arises naturally, when no one needs to chase us or convince us, then something noble has appeared. That moment shows that goodness is no longer external law. It has become inward character. It has become something we carry, something we are. Careful discernment matters because goodness without understanding can still remain incomplete. A soft heart is beautiful, but a clear mind allows that softness to become truly skillful. Discernment asks, what is the right way to help? What is needed here? What kind of giving will truly support life, dignity, practice, healing, learning, or liberation? Discernment is not coldness, it is compassion made intelligent. It does not reduce generosity. It protects it from waste, confusion, and sentimentality. It keeps the goodness of the heart from scattering blindly. This is why thoughtful consideration before giving is praised so highly. It is very different from hesitation. Hesitation asks, should I do it at all? It trembles, delays, pulls back, and bargains with itself. Discernment asks, how can I do this well? How can this act become timely, beneficial, respectful, and worthy? One weakens the current of generosity. The other deepens it. One is fear lingering at the door. The other is wisdom arranging the path. And this distinction matters greatly because in the Dhamma, the result does not arise from the object alone. It arises from the total event of mind. Before the act, during the act, and after the act, consciousness is shaping result. If before giving there is joy, during giving there is steadiness, and after giving there is glad recollection rather than regret, then the whole arc of the action becomes beautiful. The old teachings speak of this carefully, because human beings often overlook it. We think the essential thing is merely that the transfer happened. But in truth, karma records not only what passed from one hand to another, it records the quality of the heart throughout the whole movement. That is why two people can perform the same outward deed and not receive the same fruit. One gives while resenting the recipient, another gives while honoring them. One gives to silence criticism, another gives from gratitude. One gives carelessly, one gives attentively, one gives with confusion, one gives with understanding. Outwardly, the offerings may appear equal. Inwardly, they are worlds apart. And because they are inwardly different, their consequences are different as well. The fruit carries the signature of the mind that produced it. This principle is simple, but if one really lets it sink in, it changes everything. A harsh mind cannot create a gentle karmic texture. A cramped mind cannot create spaciousness. A fearful mind cannot produce the same fragrance as a fearless one. And in the same way, a giving mind filled with gladness, initiative, and discernment does not merely create future wealth or favorable conditions. It shapes a whole style of being. Such a person tends to become lighter in movement and quicker in goodness. There is less inner friction when generosity is practiced repeatedly with joy. One does not spend so much time calculating self-interest in every encounter. One responds more naturally. One sees need more quickly. One reaches out with less drama. This creates a kind of grace in conduct. Others feel safe around such a person. Relationships become less burdened by hidden bargaining. Even ordinary moments begin to carry a quiet beauty, because the person is no longer always defending the borders of mine. And because the mind has been trained in willing release, it also becomes more fortunate in ways that are not always material. Fortune, in the Buddhist sense, is not magic falling from the sky. Very often it is the ripening of conditions in a life whose causes have been made gentle, timely, and open. The generous person is easier to help, easier to trust, easier to work with, easier to love. Doors open around them not only because of mystical merit, but because their way of being does not create as many invisible obstacles. Their presence itself becomes more harmonious. This is why the teaching says that the result resembles the cause. If one acts with enthusiasm, future experience tends to carry vitality. If one acts voluntarily, future experience tends to carry freedom and readiness. If one acts with intelligence, future experience tends to carry clarity and capability. And when all these are present together, the fruit is more complete. One becomes not only blessed in possessions, but attractive in character, not only supported by circumstance, but balanced in judgment, not only fortunate in opportunity, but beautiful in response. Think of a seed planted in different conditions. The seed matters. Yes, but so do the water, the soil, the air, the light, the tending. A seed cast into dry ground may still sprout, but weakly. The same seed, cared for well, grows with strength, fullness, and resilience. In exactly this way, a wholesome act done with poor mental support may still bear fruit, but not with the same richness as an act nourished by joy, self-motivation, and wise reflection. The quality of tending changes the harvest, so generosity, when truly understood, is not a crude spiritual investment scheme. It is give this now, so I get that later. That way of thinking is still narrow, still anxious, still poor in understanding. The deeper teaching is far more beautiful. Giving is a training in freeing the mind from contraction. It is a way of weakening possessiveness, softening fear, and loosening the illusion that safety lies in clinging. Each act of true giving says something powerful to the heart. You do not become whole by gripping. You become whole by opening. And once this is seen, generosity is no longer only about the recipient. Though the recipient remains important, it is also about the transformation of the giver. The thing given may feed a body, support a life, preserve a teaching, honor a benefactor, or sustain a community. But at the same time, the act is shaping consciousness. It is teaching the mind how to inhabit the world. It is revealing whether we live as owners trapped in a burning house, or as wise people carrying out what can still be used for good before. Time takes everything anyway. That is why giving is so natural to one who understands impermanence. It is not forced morality. It is sane behavior. If this body is unstable, if possessions cannot be kept, if breath itself is uncertain, then what is wisdom? Wisdom is not merely to admire these truths in thought. Wisdom is to act from them, to let what passes through our hands become blessing while there is still time, to turn temporary resources into lasting goodness, to allow what would otherwise be consumed by decay to become part of compassion, gratitude, learning, and awakening. In this sense, generosity is not merely the movement of objects, it is the refinement of perception. At first we think we are giving things. Later we realize we are also giving fearlessness, dignity, trust, care, encouragement, access, and hope. Deeper still, we realize that the highest gift is not any material item at all, but the support of truth, practice, understanding, and liberation. And beneath all of that, something subtler is happening. The self that clings is being educated, softened, and slowly outgrown. So the one who gives with gladness is already tasting freedom. The one who gives from inner initiative is already strengthening noble character. The one who gives with discernment is already uniting compassion with wisdom. When these come together, generosity becomes complete in a very human and living way. It beautifies the act, enriches the result, and purifies the heart that performs it. This is why the teaching on giving should never be treated as a small beginner's topic, as if it were only for children in the Dhamma. Properly understood, it contains the whole path in seed form. There is letting go, there is intention, there is mindfulness, there is wisdom, there is discernment of cause and result, there is compassion, there is the weakening of greed, there is the training of consciousness. In one sincere act of giving, if done with clarity, much of the path is already present, and perhaps this is the most tender point of all. The person who learns to give in this way becomes easier to live with, not only for others but also for themselves. Their own mind becomes a kinder place to dwell, less cramped, less suspicious, less hungry in the old way. There is more room to breathe, more readiness to rejoice in others, more courage to part with what cannot truly be kept, more elegance in choosing what really matters. This is merit not as theory, but as transformation felt in the texture of a life. So we arrive here at the quiet heart of the matter. Generosity is not exhausted by the movement of wealth, food, clothing, medicine, shelter, or support. All of that matters, all of that is beautiful, but the deepest meaning of giving is that it changes the shape of the giver's mind. It turns instinct into practice, practice into character, and character into destiny. Cause and result mirror each other faithfully. The fruit does not forget the mind that planted it. And when this full teaching is assembled, the proper ending is no longer argument, and not mere admiration either. It is gratitude, it is reverence, it is the wish that what has been understood not remain as words but become life. So the heart naturally grows quiet, wide, and tender. It begins to turn outward in blessing, as if the teaching itself wants to become a prayer. May all beings live with wholesome causes and wholesome results. May all beings be established in mindfulness and wisdom. May all beings find safety, direction, and refuge in the Dhamma.